which makes an antivirus, and they're hiring hundreds of people, and they're hiring people based on merit. Now, when you're hiring people based on merit, if they can do the job, you're going to end up with random number of people of different ideologies, different races, coming from different neighborhoods, and the way they operate is that when you're in business, you're going to notice that you're going to have to talk with other corporations. You're going to have to do deals and businesses with other corporations. And what a lot of your competitors might do is that they might look at your organization and say that you're not being inclusive, that there's a lot of problems in your company, that you're not being very diverse. And these accusations, believe it or not, actually hurt the company's brand and prestige. And you're going to find that a lot of doors are being closed to your company. So how can you get rid of these accusations? Well, you need to hire a gender studies department. You need to hire a diversity officer, basically. A lot of people say that the gender studies, they don't make money. No, they managed to create this parasitic industry, which has a lot of power over STEM and over a lot of other businesses. And all they do is they do some of the easiest jobs in the world, and they earn up, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the corporation, how high up they are. But they're getting more paid for what they do. Like, all they do is they send some emails, and that no one reads them, and they make a lot of money by doing so. But anyway, so what do? Well, you finally talk with one of these companies, with a person that specializes in diversity. So he's going to spread your company on arbitrary groups. Usually it's done by race, but they can do it by gender, they can do it by ethnicity. Like if they were in Romania, where the majority of people are white, they would definitely do it by ethnicity and say how many gypsies are you hiring, how many Hungarians are you hiring, and they start looking at the company. And let's say that they look at the gender, right? Or they can
schismatic issues. That's all he has to do. But here's the problem. I've been warning for years. Joe Biden is a gaffe master. Ultimately, he's not going to be able to beat Trump because he's going to do dumb shit like this. I hope he wins the primaries because he'll get laid waste to by Donald Trump and just think he's the most viable candidate there. He's been one step from the presidency. He's got a long career. He's got the corporate backing, which gives him the money advantage, maybe. The idea that a small grassroots progressive uprising is going to give the Democrats the edge in 2020 if they nominate somebody like Sanders, who's even older than Biden, who's already geriatric in the literal sense. I think he just turned 75 or 76 not that long ago. The idea that that's going to swing the election, when those people are largely cloistered in states where turnout was already high for Hillary, this is why she won the popular vote, because of a bunch of Californians and New Yorkers, that's not going to happen. That's locked in the blue states that the Democrats already have an overwhelming superiority in. There aren't a lot of far-left progressive movements in Iowa. There aren't a lot of college Marxist organizations in a place like New Hampshire. That's just not the way that it is. Biden is fucking doomed, though, because of stuff like this. It's the optics of it. It's not policy related. You can debate all day over policy. Politics fundamentally is shifting away from policy, at least for the short term, and this is part of the current paradigm, so I wouldn't worry about it being like... Some people are like, well, it's idiocracy. It's come true. Well, now, things can be temporary. There have been moments in time in the past where charisma and personality, or stuff like that, basic gimmicks, have taken the fore in politics temporarily. And then there are times when things are much more... There's a feeling of togetherness. It's less partisan. And it's sort of unifying for the nation, and you get back to like policy, like during a major war or something. And I don't mean like Iraq. They tried to use that for togetherness and rip the nation half apart. So if you go to Joe Biden's, fake campaign website, apparently it's #1 in Google ranks. If you look up Joe Biden campaign or Joe Biden website, stuff like that, it's on the top list. Joe Biden's official campaign site isn't even on the front page. Now this also indicates something else. Google obviously likes the Democrats. Face it, Google as a company leans towards the left. I don't think that it's like conspiracy theory land or something like that. It's just they're in Silicon Valley. What more can you say? The algorithms there were largely built by people who are more pro-Democrat, and yet Joe Biden is being abused by their algorithms. Now, isn't that something? The Democrats will come and say, Google, change your algorithms again. We need to fight fake news. And they'll use it as an excuse to take a little more power for corporations. It won't just be Google doing it. Facebook will ban anyone from linking it out probably, and Instagram will ban anyone talking about it. And then all of the Twitter will get involved and ban the hashtag and algorithmically demote mention of it. And they'll do the echo chamber, Silicon Valley, circle the wagon sort of thing, because they want Joe Biden to be elected. They want him to be the nominee because they think that he can beat Trump, and they certainly want Trump out. It's really a prelude to the 2020 election in part. But that's, it deals with the 2020 election explicitly. But in this case, it's not fake news. There's no justification for removing political parity, and if they do, there will be hell to pay. Because people say, okay, now they're going after strict parity. There's nothing here that isn't based on the objective reality of simply the optics of who Joe Biden is. He happens to act in a creepy manner around certain females. That's just the way that it is. And this also shows, at least to me, this is what my mind tells me. Joe Biden has almost no organic grassroots support of any hardened type. Like, if you think about it, Sanders has fewer fans. Kamala Harris has fewer fans. Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg, these people. They have less fans, but they're much more fervent. They're excited for their candidates. Now, I don't think that necessarily translates into a win. If you end up alienating all the center-left voters in the country, you still lose. This is the Democrat dilemma of 2020. It's going to go down in the history books, I think. But with Joe Biden, he's just a boring dude. He's not exciting. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, he was capable of being exciting to people. He's an old man with ideas that even for the Democrats now are becoming a bit dated because they've schismed as a party into groups that are even less leftist friendly and are now waffling over towards independent or Republican status, and firebrand young progressives and socialists who are really, really out there who think that someone like Joe Biden's unacceptable because he's an old white male. That's really what it amounts to.
Oh, Carcat, you
So his voting bloc isn't excited. His voting bloc is terrified. They're the business Dems and the center left and the old school moderates of the 90s and stuff. Moderates again, so-called, that are looking at the other groups within the Democratic Party and they're like, shit, what the fuck is happening? Oh, my God, Biden's the only one here who's sane. They're not excited to vote for him. They're voting out of fear. This is the schism of the Democratic Party. You've got the idealist voters and the scared voters, basically. But you don't have any real positivity. Those idealist voters are filled with hate. We see their vitriol every day. They say, like, punch this person, attack people for their... I mean, they're looking more like the multicultural version of the Ku Klux Klan every single day. And I don't mean the has barbecue and occasionally says N-word Klan of today. I'm talking about, like, the pre-90s lynching people Ku Klux Klan. Like back when they actually were more recognizably and objectively actually hateful in their actions, not just their words. It's crazy. And the Democrats want to say that anyone that doesn't join them is endangering the country. Oh my God, Trump is so divisive. You can't even unify your own party. How the hell are you going to unify the United States? Now they're melting down. They're melting down over a parody website. And even Google can't protect them. I think it's hilarious. That's about all. Peace out. All right, everyone. The other day, Donald Trump came out and he was doing a tweet storm, which is, they've sort of coined that term to label it when he makes more than 2 tweets in a morning. And he was retweeting several other people, and now all of a sudden, like, Business Insider had a meltdown almost immediately. He retweeted Paul Joseph Watson and Lauren Southern. So they came out and said, well, we're tweeting conspiracy theorist Paul Joseph Watson and vile racist Lauren Southern, which I don't think that they've ever spoken to her or interviewed her to actually get, like, the true skinny on her beliefs. But this is a common theme of what the legacy media does. They didn't waste any time. Like Krasenstein, when I tweeted out that I was overjoyed that Trump would retweet other people who were talking about tech censorship, Brian Krasenstein, of all people, shows up on my tweet to say, well, let me know when Facebook is a state or something like that. Like, let me know when they're actually an independent entity that doesn't platform government officials that our tax money pays for. When they stop doing that, then they can be a true private business. When they stop doing that and taking subsidies from California and stop using various tax models that the neoliberals gave to them because they're the ones that are sucking corporate cock right now. When they give up those tax schemes that allows them to use 2 or 3 other countries to pay a 0% income tax rate, okay, then you've contributed to society. Your CEO is a net benefit to the United States beyond simply the prestige of Facebook having to exist here. Or Instagram, both Zuckerberg assets, and then you can whine about your private right to ban people for political speech. Until then, you're not really a true private entity. I pointed this out the other day. Really, these companies aren't truly private. They're using a U.S. military-based DARPANET-derived infrastructure in the first place.
That doesn't matter.
Platforming government officials.
We're using the metric system in our math.
Providing government services, especially Twitter. You can get USGS alerts right on your phone. You get rung. There's a quake. Take cover. There's been an earthquake. A tsunami might be coming. Get to high ground now. If you ban somebody in a low-lying coastal area, they could die because of a tsunami, literally because they got banned off of Twitter. That's the surreal thing. That's the power of Silicon Valley today, and that's what we have to watch out for. But what happened is that Trump has come out now, finally. Don Jr. has been on the forefront of this for the better part of a year. He's been really the attack dog against tech censorship. I guess they decided that in the wake of the latest bans, enough was enough, and they had to start defending people, and that's a very wise move. I said the best thing Donald Trump can do is come out hard and heavy against tech censorship. Because by and large, a bunch of independent content creators across the internet helped to put him in office. We did help to tip the scales. The power of the internet is quite wonderful. Silicon Valley understands this, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing now. If you actually think that they're concerned about extremism, think of the children, cyberbullying, all of these family-friendly brand names that they propagandize to people to justify their fascistic corporate censorship, then I hate to say it, but your intelligence quotient might be in the mediocre range. That's not why they're doing it. These are for-profit corporations. They didn't get where they are by being nice or by caring about people's lives. They're still just businesses, and they need to be reined in. Now, some people are saying, some progressive, like Esteval, he's a progressive. He agrees in eliminating tech censorship, but he's like, well, how are you going to do that without government regulation? The regulations are already on the books under some of our anti-monopoly and antitrust laws that have in some cases been around for many, many decades. The idea that a private business has the unilateral authority to do basically whatever it wants is restricted. It's restricted in the sense, and this is a libertarian principle, oddly enough, in that it cannot victimize other people. Now, with equal protection under the law now enshrined in our Constitution, that's part of our country's makeup as well. It's part of the fabric of our nation. I go further, I say the concept of the First Amendment is a philosophical one. The constitutional amendment itself is strictly legal. It's the government can't abuse you and prevent you from speaking freely. So then how is it okay for the government to have all sorts of business and corporate ties to Silicon Valley and then simply export that same potential abuse of your constitutional right to a private entity? It doesn't make any sense. Until they are 100% totally privatized, providing no platform for any government official or service, they shouldn't be able to do that sort of thing. And then those officials and so forth, they'd have to use different platforms. Somebody would come along and say, okay, yeah, we want you to use our service, and we won't censor people for political beliefs. If Congress really pressed the issue, that could happen. But I'll tell you what the problem is. I'll tell you this is the total problem.
I'll tell you what.
The problem with reining in, like Zuckerberg especially, is that for the last, what is it now? When did Facebook get founded? I can't even remember the year. More than a decade. Virtually everyone has had a Facebook. A lot of the politicians that are in there were not politicians when they had Facebook accounts. They've probably got some shit that Zuckerberg knows about them. They don't want it to get out. They're paranoid. They're afraid of these people. Our government is being hijacked by fascists, and people like Brian Krasenstein are worried about Paul Joseph Watson or Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern fired off a flare one time. Oh my God, we have to make sure she never works a fucking again. Paul Joseph Watson. Oh my God, you know what he is? He's a conspiracy theorist. He worked with Alex Jones. Who fucking cares? Yes, InfoWars is trying to take over the world in order to, I don't know, and in order to make the frogs less homosexual or something. He's trying to reduce the fluoride intake of your children. Very, very strange, very horrible person. Meanwhile, Zuckerberg's like, hey, I have private info about hundreds of millions of individuals. I sell it to other countries and to various corporations.
Oh, God.
Sometimes I accidentally do so in the wrong way, and then it gets spread further. But we've got to work together to combat extremism. I think it is among the most extreme positions you can possibly take up. When you're fomenting in your mind the idea that someone who is a multi-billionaire, who has a corporation that's worth even more than that, many, many tens of billions of dollars, has private dirt on, half the citizen population of the U.S. and some of our politicians, that he shouldn't be reined in at all. Not only that, he should be the arbiter of what you can say and what you can think. Like, you want essentially a few dozen individuals to control your mind. Essentially, you're pushing for oligarchy. Now, that's funny because a few years ago, the left had a big thing about, well, we're devolving into a corporate oligarchy, and it's a bad thing. That's what you're handing Silicon Valley. This would be no different than if your one-horse town had one car dealership and the car dealer said, I don't like you, you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or, you're apolitical and I think you should be more active in politics. So you better change your mind or I'm not selling you a car. Yeah, you can use the roads, but you have to walk. You're not allowed to buy a car. That's basically what it amounts to. And instead, and again, and this is pointed, I think Southern and Paul Joseph Watson both pointed this out. You've got to understand that fundamentally, while there are technically private businesses, competitors to these platforms, like for YouTube, there's BitChute, there's Dailymotion. For Twitter, there's Gab. There's that one that Candace Owens pushed. I can't remember the name because, as far as I know, it's a flash in the pan sort of thing. For Amazon, yes, there are other technical publishing on-demand services, but they're not really competitors. Government services don't take. You're not going to get USGS alerts on Gab. You probably should be able to, but you don't. The government of the United States has made a definitive choice on which platforms it chooses to use as well. Taxpayer funded. The staffers that are managing those accounts are funded from somewhere. Where do you think they get their money? Out of the blue? Does Zuckerberg pay them? Is Twitter going to start paying the employee salaries of all of the people who work at USGS? Are we going to privatize all the government bureaucracies and just turn them into Facebook and Twitter services or something? I wouldn't be surprised if they push for it. Oh yeah, don't worry, we'll handle it. Then the constitutional issue goes away. So it'll be very. So again, doesn't that sound a little bit like the boogeyman of fake libertarianism, like a la the Koch brothers, that's been talked about by people like the Krasensteins for years? Oh my God, if you privatize these things, corporations will abuse you. But Silicon Valley is okay. No, it's because they're going after their competitors. The legacy media.
Get out of
Business
here.
Insider, AOL did a big hit piece the other day. Totally defamatory, too. These people should be sued for what they're saying. They're all dogpiling on this issue, but the people that they're encouraging the banning of are their competitors. It's no surprise that the legacy media would enjoy it when some independent commentator with millions of fans gets banned off of another platform. It means more attention for them. It's as clear as day. It's as simple as that. It's all about the money. That's all it's ever been about. And for the politicians, it's about keeping their jobs because a lot of them, they're like Anthony Weiner. They sent dick pics to the wrong person 10 years ago when they were just, a lowly lawyer. And now all of a sudden they find themselves in the U.S. Senate. And they're like, well, no, I vote against keeping Mark Zuckerberg accountable. He's a private business and can do what he wants. Why do you think they would make that argument? There's nothing else in it for them. I have a feeling that most grassroots individuals don't like the idea of corporate fascism. But it's been rebranded by these people as family-friendly, and that's really the problem. They've been fooled. They've been brainwashed into thinking that multi-billion-dollar corporations care about little old them. And I pointed out, in closing here, I pointed out one final thing. It's asinine to say, well, the corporation should be trusted to hold people accountable for speech instead of individuals determining that for themselves and debating amongst themselves. Despite the fact that if a corporation abuses people, it can hire 100 lawyers to defend itself and prevent any accountability. Private individuals, when they do wrong or when they say something unconscionable or something, they can't. They're unable to do so. You're actually at the fundamental root of it. Power should always be held by the lowest possible unit it can be held by, usually the individual. Certain small organizations and businesses, second to that, small government groups like local as opposed to state or federal, and then corporations and federal government should be at the bottom. They should have the least power. They should be the most constrained because they can be the most abusive, because they have the most potential power to abuse with. That's about all. Peace out.
What should I play next? We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. What should I play next? We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarantee artistic freedom. 'Cause I don't know. We must guarant So apparently you can search up UFOs. UFOs are fun. Let's put this up in the last month. UFO.
The U.S. Navy is preparing new guidelines for pilots on how to report sightings of UFOs.
I'm streaming. I'm just watching YouTube videos while streaming. Because usually no one's here. You want me to play one of your videos? I'll do that. Take requests.
The military reports there have been strange sightings of unauthorized or unidentified aircraft over its airspace in recent years, though no confirmed encounters with anybody from some other place. But the Navy is updating its process so that investigators can look into each individual report. Our national security correspondent, Jennifer
UFOs
Griffin,
confirmed.
is live at the Pentagon. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Shep. Well, the Pentagon closed its office that dealt with UFO sightings in 2012 when Congress, in essence, stopped funding it. That office was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Now, after a series of unusual encounters by Navy jets, like this one in 2017, showing an F-18 Super Hornet encountering an unidentified object, the Navy has decided it needs to codify how its sailors and pilots record such unexplained events in case these flying objects are in fact some kind of advanced aircraft sent by the Russians or Chinese to spy on the U.S. military. In essence, the U.S. Navy and Pentagon are trying to destigmatize reporting what they call unexplained aerial phenomena. Today, the Navy issued a statement, quote, "The Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authorities. A new message to the fleet that will detail the steps for reporting is in draft. In response to requests for information from congressional members and staff, Navy officials have provided a series of briefings by senior naval intelligence officials as well as aviators who reported hazards to aviation safety. For many years, it was considered a career ender to report these unexplained encounters, so many military personnel had downplayed them, Shep.
Is there anything to the timing of this?
Well, since 2014, there have been an increasing number of encounters. Most of them are suspected drones. After the 2017 F-18 incident and the release of this Navy video showing the pilot's reaction to the strange aerial encounter, the Pentagon established an office inside the Defense Intelligence Agency to study these recent phenomena at the urging of several U.S. senators who set aside $25 million for the new office. Among the incidents closely studied was an aerial incursion involving the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier strike group, which lasted several days and involved what pilots described as aircraft that flew in a manner that...
How does radar work?
In this session, I'll be going to discuss...
Oh, this is going to be great.
...by having this radar system.
Yeah, no, it was more like something else, something more...
Radar. Radar is a method of detect...
Holy moly. I mean, I want my kids to learn stuff, but they got to learn how to pronounce it too. Jeez, I'm sorry.
Hello friends, welcome back.
Racist.
Today I'll be talking about radar.
Kotaku articles.
I think
Please
this is the
now.
duplexer that works as both transmit...
Dude, the top 3 videos. Oh my god.
How does radar work? There are few greater joys than shouting rude words very loudly at a cliff. Not only do you get to hear yourself saying something that would shock your mother, bollocks is my favourite, but you also get to hear it a second time, and maybe a third or a fourth, because as the sound waves produced by your voice reach the surface of the rock face, they come bouncing back to you. This phenomenon obviously is an echo, and once you've substituted radio waves for sound waves...
I don't really want to learn about the echoing part. I want to learn like what type of materials, because I thought they'd work on metals but not plastics. I don't know.
It also pretty much explains how radar works. See? Bollocks. Because, as you'll have noticed, if you stand further away from the cliff you're shouting at, then the noise will take longer to get back to you. Indeed, if you pick your location carefully to be different distances from a variety of cliffs, the same word will come back to you multiple times from all over the place. Radio waves had barely been discovered before it was realized that, like sound or light waves, they too would reflect from solid objects. Initially, this was more of a problem than a solution. The shipboard operators of the early spark gap transmitters noticed that other vessels passing between them and the radio operator they were trying to communicate with caused interference. But it wasn't long before boffins realized the principle could be used to detect things, and the telemobiloscope was born.
Whoa!
Okay, so the name didn't catch on. Radar appeared later as an American near acronym for radio detection and ranging. And although patents had been filed in 1904, nobody did much to develop radar for several decades. A French cruise liner being the first ship fitted with an obstacle locating radio system in the 1930s. It was the military that really spotted the potential of radar, with America, Britain, Germany, and the Soviet Union all rushing to develop systems as things looked set to kick off in the 1930s. There were some obvious strategic advantages in being able to detect enemy ships and, especially, aeroplanes. The British Chain Home system didn't look like modern radar equipment, used a fixed antenna array to send out a wide beam of radar energy, with returns then read by receivers nearby. The time between the signal and its return, based on the known velocity of the radio waves, which is the speed of light, enabled distance to be worked out. And using multiple angled receivers and comparing the different returns on each one enabled both the position and height of the target to be roughly calculated. We almost certainly wouldn't have won the Battle of Britain without radar's ability to tell us where the Luftwaffe was amassing, the dirty fuckers. Radar's utility was obvious, and more powerful systems were developed, including the familiar rotating array that pulses a signal and then listens for its return before pulsing another. But the principle remains the same. Shout, listen. Okay, there has been one big development, Doppler radar. This enables the system to detect the speed of a moving object without having to wait for two separate pulses to hit it and be bounced back, which in the case of a really fast-moving jet fighter or missile might take too long. This is where the Doppler effect comes in. This is the way in which the pitch of a wave changes according to the relative speed of the object it bounces off. It sounds complicated, but it isn't. Imagine you've installed a very loud mate a mile away and told him, a variation of our obscene echo experiment, to yell rude words at you for exactly a minute. His voice is carried at the speed of sound. Let's call it a nice round 600 miles per hour, meaning that 6 seconds after he starts screaming, the sound waves reach you, and 6 seconds after he's finished, the sound stops. Easy. But now we're going to install him on the back of a pickup truck, one so quiet you can only hear him shouting. The truck is travelling towards you at exactly 60 miles per hour, or to simplify the maths a bit, for anyone who drags their knuckles numerically, that means it will take him exactly 1 minute to complete the mile. He starts to shout as the truck passes the 1 mile mark and speeds towards you. As before, it takes 6 seconds for the first sound to reach you. And you'll also notice that his voice sounds a little bit higher pitched than usual, which you initially put down to him being a bit of a Jessie. 60 seconds later, the truck passes you, just as your mate finishes shouting. So what's happened? Because he's been travelling relative to the speed of sound, which is serving as an unbreakable absolute here, he's...
Okay, I don't need to know how this works. We got a Tim Pool. Again, I'm taking requests for what to play here on YouTube. I'm thinking conspiracy theories. I mean, my default's always politics, but I don't want to play any right now because I don't know. Some people don't like that, I guess. But I got some crazy anime memes. That's how you say that word. You guys have been saying it wrong. My recommendations are not going to be good for YouTube. Unless I start just rewatching Asmongold highlight clips. If I get ganked, no, I better not get ganked again. Yesterday was awful. Yesterday was the worst. What is this?
Hey guys, what's up? Mad Season here, back with another video for you. It's about time for another episode in my patch by patch series, where I go over each patch in the game's history one by one, and I give you a glimpse of how the game has changed over the years. There's quite a lot going on in the last episode. We talked a bit more about the old skill and talent systems, we took a peek at the talent trees for the Priest and Rogue, and we saw the arrival of the 9th and final class, the Hunter. We also saw boats and zeppelins make their debut, and much more. It's kind of a hard patch to top content-wise. In this video, however, we're entering patch 0.10, which released in September of 2004. This one saw quite a few major systems being added or changed as well. Particularly in the late game, we have a plethora of updates. First, we have the level cap being raised to 60. Finally, after months and months of testing, we've reached the cap for vanilla World of Warcraft. 60 doesn't sound like a lot, especially if you play the current game, but it was quite a task back then. It took the average player months to reach it, which a lot of people might say is a bad thing. Who would want to grind for 2 months to even start the endgame? But it's just another one of the things that made Classic special. It was an adventure, and you really saw your character grow in power inch by inch, and it gave you such a strong sense of character progression, which I think is actually harder to get nowadays. With how fast it is to level, and even the ability to straight up buy level boosts, the game today is more about that instant gratification, which is fine. Current and Classic are two different games.
I do not like the instant gratification, man. That's why I'm playing a vanilla server right now. I cannot wait for Classic to come out. Give me a like if you like Classic. I know you all do.
But it's not without its downsides. The journey to 60 is really something that I'm looking for.
Yes, the journey to 60 is long and cumbersome. Here I am 5 hours, 5 days into my tune. I'm only level 40. You could say I'm halfway there. But the thing is, when you get to 60 though, you appreciate it and you realize everyone else who's level 60 went through the same bullshit as you. It's kind of like going through basic training. Everyone gets the same thing, and that way you're like, oh, we all know what's up. We're all equal. We're all the same.
To with Retail Classic, and I'm really curious to see how players will react to it. Anyways, I'm getting way off track here. With level 60 now attainable, the next step is that endgame, and appropriately, 0.10 saw some big updates in that realm. First up, we have the raid group system. Raid group functionality is now available. They'll be able to fight together in instance dungeons and work together to accomplish tasks too difficult for 5-member groups. Something really interesting to note here is that at this point, dungeons weren't capped to 5 players. This would only change in patch 1.3, which was the Dire Maul patch, where Blizzard finally added caps to all of the dungeons in the game, and even still, most of them were set to 10, so still technically raidable. The exception would be Dire Maul, which was 5 players max, so this was the first really hard dungeon because you couldn't simply zerg through it like all of the others. But until then, there wasn't anything stopping you from running the Dead Mines with the 40-man raid of level 20s, as evidenced by these old beta screenshots. Here we see a dwarf role-playing guild of 10 adventuring through the dungeon and trading loot. The only downsides would be that you'd receive less XP than you normally would, since you got that penalty in raid groups.
Yeah.
Although at this point, you could still do any quest in raid, which was pretty broken. And obviously splitting like 5 drops between 40 people would be kind of tough. They were still balanced around 5 players for the most part, so ideally, you'd stick to that to maximize your XP and loot. But it's interesting that there was an option of just zerging the hell out of everything if you were having difficulty. Speaking of instances though, we have 2 more added in this patch, and that's the Blackrock Spire and Stratholme. It's hard to overstate just how monumental both of these instances were in the game. If you ask any vanilla player what their favorite dungeons or raids were in the game, Stratholme or the Blackrock Spire is gonna be a popular answer. It's hard to do them justice really, but I'll try anyways. First, we have the befouled city of Stratholme, now home of the Scourge and other various evildoers. The dungeon was unofficially split up into 2 sides. You have Human, which you go to by taking a left from the main entrance, and this would be filled with the corrupted Scarlet Crusade, led by the Dreadlord Balnazzar, posing as their leader, Sidon Dathrohan. If you instead took a right, however, you would enter the Undead side, where you had to fight through a small army of Scourge, and ultimately take on the Horseman, Baron Rivendare. There is a locked back entrance, secret bosses abound, keys to collect, and a huge amount of lore tied to it, with players first laying eyes upon it in Warcraft 3 actually. It was the ultimate dungeon crawling experience tuned for that early endgame, and probably my personal favorite. Just like all the other dungeons, you could bring in 10 players all the way until patch 1.10, although as I remember, that was quite rare. Usually, if you knew what you were doing, 5 was more than enough, and honestly, I think a lot of people just didn't know that you could bring 10. Well, at least I didn't. Now, this isn't patch point 10, but it's kind of interesting, so I thought I'd show you anyways. But prior to this patch, there did exist another version of Stratholme with a wildly different layout. Heading left from the entrance just leads to a dead end, and heading to the right, where you'd normally find the chapel and the service entrance, we instead have that Scarlet Bastion and a wall where the back door would eventually be. So this would actually be the human portion of the dungeon. Heading inside, you can see it's super early as there aren't even any textures, and the building is much smaller in general. In the foyer here, we have some stairs leading up, and if you keep going, you go into that generic war planning room that you see in a few different buildings. So this is probably where you'd fight a boss or something. Heading past the Bastion though, the rest of the dungeon is loosely the same and tons of quests to complete here, and it was usually the trial run for players to get ready for the primetime raids like the Molten Core and Onyxia. The latter, of course, actually having quite an extensive quest chain to get it tuned for, the finale of which was in the Upper Blackrock Spire. So, just by these instances themselves, Point 10 is already quite an iconic patch, I think. And with new dungeons and raids come new zones. 3 more in this one, and that's Winterspring and the Western and Eastern Plaguelands. Appropriately, these would be the final 3 zones added to the game. Not really a whole lot to say about these, other than that we get to look at that cool overhead map style. The tunnel from Winterspring.
What's up, my dudes? To choose the right class for you in Vanilla WoW, you'll have to decide which you'll enjoy playing.
So, obviously the Undead Shadow Priest is what I want to do. It's my preferred thing. But I have a wife. She's got an Alliance tattoo. So, you know how things are. So I'm going to be playing some type of a warrior on the Alliance side instead. I think it's a better choice to play a warrior instead of a Shadow Priest. It'll be more fun, better endgame, better rating, better everything.
The most. This may either include or exclude factors like race, appearance, tier sets, PvP and PvE competence, lore, gold farming ability, and the list goes on. As you can tell, there's quite a bit to cover, so let's get into it and I'll help you guys out. We got the warrior first. If you're looking for one of those god
What are you gonna play? What do you play? You play a hunter?
Mode classes, then warriors are definitely among them. Every last spec of the warrior is viable. They're considered to be one of the best bets for tanking in Vanilla WoW. Their DPS, especially at endgame, is off the charts, and they're just a blast to play in general. That said, many people consider them to be one of the slowest levelers actually. The reason being is that as far as playstyle is concerned, from 1 to 30, you can expect to pretty much auto attack, kind of like paladins, but you'll have your heroic strike and overpower abilities to kind of keep things sort of interesting for you as you go along. So while Fury has the high damage from at least 1 to 40 as compared to Arms. Arms, of course, has that utility that you'll potentially want. Usually from 40 to 60, you can either respec into Arms, or you can just roll two-handed Fury all the way to 60. It's all up to you, really. A kind of bonus for the warriors who decide to take up the role of tanking when you go into dungeons is that you can actually pretty easily create your own groups. So you can exclude certain classes that may be able to wear the same kind of pieces as you for a certain dungeon if you're looking for the right kind of piece, just to increase your
starting groups in general. Whenever I make a group, I don't invite any other clothies besides me. I'm the healer. Fuck off.
Chances as far as that's concerned. Or, of course, you can just reserve a piece prior to even going in the dungeon and just let people know ahead of time that you're doing that. Also, as an aside, if you roll Fury dual wielding as you go through and you level, rolling through mobs when they're at your level or maybe a little bit lower is actually pretty easy and quite fun. While some people may see this as a con for warriors, I actually find that it's an awesome factor that for warriors, when you have pocket heals alongside you, you can really do some damage and ultimately become an unstoppable wrecking ball beyond what you already are as far as World PvP or Battlegrounds is concerned. This is of course assuming that you have the right kind of gear and all that, but when you do, man, you are just unstoppable. And I consider this actually to be a pro because I think it influences you to find friends and really gain relationships with other people. When you hit 60 and you're PvPing and getting into raids and all that, you're gonna have to collect multiple sets. As with many classes, you're gonna have to go for your PvP gear, your resistance gear, general PvE gear, tank gear, whatever it might be. You know, it can be kind of difficult to deal with farming all the consumables that you'll need for certain raids and things like that, but the payoff is just amazing. So I really encourage you guys to stick to the warrior and just trust me, guys, it'll be a blast. Next on the list, we have paladins, considered by many to be one of the most efficient healers, especially by endgame. Going properly into the holy tree, if you get that full 5 out of 5 illumination, you can get a 100% mana refund for getting a crit on a heal. Maybe to some this might not seem like it would happen so often, but I'm telling you,
100% mana refund on crit healing. Man, imagine if they had this spell too, like the oh, you know, additional chance to crit when you heal.
you guys, when you get the right pieces at level 60, it really becomes such a significant part of the healing role for paladins. You'll often see at endgame many well-geared paladins out healing many of the other classes just simply because of their sheer endless mana pool. Rolling Ret isn't actually half bad. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Esfand. He's kind of living proof that Ret paladins can really tear up some faces with the right consumables, with the right gear, all that good stuff. And so Ret is actually what you'll usually want to be rolling when you level up your paladin. Some people go for proc at maybe level 40 or so and start doing some AoE pulls. But anyways, until then, yeah, you might want to roll Ret. As far as prot is concerned with paladins, yes, they can be tanks, and I've actually seen some pretty good paladin tanks. They can be amazing 5-man tanks just because of the ability that they have to do some nice AoE pulls. They don't have a taunt, so that's kind of the downside, but mixing in Righteous Fury and buffing everyone else with Blessing of Salvation.
God, the Paladin tier 2 set looked so good. Man, that's awesome.
You can really get that threat increase, hold the mobs you need, and do some damage. Their gold farming ability isn't half bad, actually. You can run some DME jump runs, you can farm a bit of BRD, and find some nice general locations where you can actually have a lot of fun, do some nice stuff there. Of course, many paladins actually end up just rolling with professions like alchemy to really rely on their gold making ability in that sense. But yes, it's also an option, of course, for them to go into some AoE gold farming. They might not be as proficient as mages, for example, but yes, they are great at it nonetheless. Their set pieces look amazing also, of course, just like the Warrior. The Judgment set and even the Redemption set is just pretty cool to me. They have a lot of abilities to help you get out of certain situations that you wouldn't really want to be in or that you accidentally got yourself in, you know, with your bubbles, lay on hands, stuff like that. You know, you can really save yourself from otherwise certain doom, especially with that Bubble Hearth, baby. You can't go wrong. They're incredible healers when it comes to PvP, as they're very tanky. They got those oh shit buttons. With a solid DPS class by their side, they can tear up some faces. And even by themselves, if you roll Rets and you get the right gear and all that good stuff, like I was saying before, yeah, you can do some serious damage. Next, we have the Rogue. Rogues are by far one of the most played classes in Vanilla WoW, and there's a reason for it. Not only are they one of the best raid and dungeon DPS classes in
most played class, though. Then Warrior, then Rogues. Who's the least played? Druids. Oh. Ooh. Druids.
Vanilla WoW, and there's a reason for it. Not only are they one of the best raid and dungeon DPSers, they are also just amazing at PvP. Having a rogue can really create such a unique experience for you, as you'll be able to do things like stealth your way into a major city and roll into an inn, taking out people left and right, you know, especially with that burst damage, situational skills, and cooldowns. They can do some serious damage, and I'm telling you guys, even during the leveling experience, I'd say they can be pretty fun to play. If you want to be a ganking god in Vanilla WoW, this is your first stop. Some of the downfalls of playing a rogue is the fact that you'll need certain reagents like vanishing powders, blinding powders, you know, your poisons. It can also be kind of difficult to compete with other players as far as getting pieces of gear is concerned, because of course you're going to be playing against many other rogues on your team, so I see no reason not to play rogue as far as the big picture, guys. I mean, with some of the tactics you can pull in Battlegrounds, World PvP, raiding, rolling dungeons, and even just during the leveling experience, you can really learn your class well, while also having the ability to farm farm gold pretty easily. I've heard from many rogues that they'll just go into BRD at level 60 and pickpocket their way through, making actually a decent amount of gold per hour, helping them get that epic mount. So yes, of course, highly recommended. Next, we have the Priest. Priests are considered by many to be the best overall healer in Vanilla WoW, simply because of their overall healing ability, situational adaptation, and high skill ceiling. So yes, they are a very, very interesting class to play. And even in PvP, if you roll a Shadow Priest, you can do some absolute serious damage, especially on a 1v1 basis. They're one of the best, if not the best specs to kind of melt faces and really do some awesome things. And of course, rolling a Priest has a serious upside as far as you being able to pretty easily get into dungeons, just like Paladins, Shamans, and Druids, you know, because they have that healing ability. Especially the Priest, though, it seems that overall people come to them first. So you can expect random whispers from different types of players as you level up to go into dungeons, so that you can not only gain that little bit of extra experience, but of course also save up some gold for your mount at level 40 and further on for professions and all that good stuff. Now, as far as Shadow Priests are concerned, when it comes to PvP, yes, you can crush some faces. Crush faces, guys. Finding the right gear for your Shadow Priest can be difficult. You know, getting a raid spot can be difficult, you know, especially with the limited debuff slots. Raid groups won't really want to take too many Shadow Priests. You'll also have the awesome Benediction and Anathema quest line, your unique PvP abilities like Mind Control to really play around with some people. You'll have great offensive healing PvP abilities. With the Priest, you really can't go wrong, guys. I'm telling you. Next, we have the Mage, and I mean, holy Jesus.
No, your Priest, you can definitely go wrong.
Guys, if we were looking for the holy grails of the holy grail for classes, then the Mage would be it. They have not only high utility for convenience sake as far as portals, slow fall, conjuring water, that kind of thing is concerned, but they're also pretty much the best ranged DPS in the game. Again, with a very high skill cap, you can really do some awesome things. AoE leveling is a breeze. You can farm gold unbelievably easy before level 40 to get that mount. At level 60, that farming ability is even more obvious. You'll have a lot of viability as far as the specs you get to choose. Arcane, Frost, and Fire, they're all viable. You're one of the most sought after DPS classes when it comes to 5-mans because of your awesome CC abilities and pure damage output. You don't take as much threat for doing a crazy amount of damage like the Warlock, for example, with their Shadow Bolt. For all these reasons, mages are just pure awesomeness. There aren't many downsides with mages, other than the fact that you might be limited in the specs you'll be able to choose for certain raids, like when you're going into Molten Core, you're going to have to go Frost, things like that. Of course, you'll have to farm for consumables, but again, like I said, mages are pretty much one of the best farming classes in Vanilla WoW. So, in fact, many people choose to level a mage first as kind of an alt, or even second, you know, whatever, to get just some extra gold in for their main, as they're just that good at farming. I'm sure I don't have to really mention this, but Battlegrounds, World PvP, and just PvP in general, they're just amazing, guys. Really great. They can tear up some faces solo or otherwise. Now we have the Warlock. If you want to be a special snowflake, you might want to roll this class. I think the Warlock is kind of underrepresented. I honestly find Warlocks to be probably one of the most interesting classes in the game, simply because of the variety and utility that they have. Being able to summon players, create things like health stones, soul stones, have awesome quest lines to summon the Inferno and the Doomguard. With those guys, you can have them go on rampages, as after a certain point when they lose that enslave debuff, of course they go rogue, and you can sit back and relax and watch the
You want to fight? I'll fight.
If you've watched my content, you probably know I hold the opinion that the left is kind of going crazy. And I have a bunch of data now to explain how I've come to this opinion and why I think the left is going insane. So I tweeted this yesterday, and I was actually surprised. It got a ton of retweets. This is why they keep calling everyone far right. The right barely moved, and the left has gone off the rails. Let's take a look at this graph. This is from Pew Research. This is credible data. Here we can see in 1994, The median Democrat and the median Republican are very both close to the center. In 2017, this is where the Democrats are as of the past 2 years, and the Republicans are here. But check this out. The Republican median has shifted only slightly to the right. Is that a shift to the right? Of course. Are there a lot of conservatives? Of course there are. But look at the shift from the Democrats. It's massive. It's what, 10 times the shift that Republicans had? So here's what happens. These people look over here and see the conservatives as being far away and say, wow, they're far right. When in reality, they are the far left and have always been the far left, at least as long as I've been alive. But there's a few important points to be brought up. First, take a look at where the Democrats are now and where they, where they are now and where they were. And you can see that there were Democrats and even Republicans who line up where they're currently at today, which means these people have always viewed themselves as moderates. No one thinks they're an extremist. They think they're the rational center, always. Now that you have the median here, their ideas are being reinforced that they are mainstream, that they are normal, when in reality, you would still probably find most Americans average out somewhere around the middle. Although that's a big pull to the left. Why did Donald Trump get the support of so many former Democrats? And he did. I've shown other graphs where we can see that liberals and conservatives supported Trump. It's because the shift to the left was so dramatic in 2017. And mind you,
what are you doing?
This is before the midterms in 2018, where we saw the election of the far left into Congress. So check this out. Look at where the median Democrat was in 94, and look at the gap to median Republican. It's very small. What happens then is, as the Democrats shift ridiculously to the left, they're looking the same distance and saying there are no moderate Republicans anymore. Of course, this bump right here is probably never Trumpers, if you ask me. So even if you took the same distance of Republican compared to Democrat in 2017, the Republican, the gap they're looking at is still further to the left of the median Democrat in 94, which the point I'm trying to make is Democrats have moved so far to the left that they think people to the left of Democrats in 94 are far right or are staunchly conservative. Now we can see there's a spike here, right? There's definitely some movement towards more conservative policy, absolutely. But seriously, on a 10-item scale of political values, the left has shifted heavily away from American median, American norms. And there's more charts to go along with this. This is a chart from The Economist. It says swing left. Okay, I don't make this up. United States distribution of ideology of House candidates who won their primaries. Look at this. In the 1980s, we can see that the Democrats actually were slightly closer to the center than Republicans were. Republicans were a little further to the right. You can see where the median is right here. It's right of center. Over time, it starts to shift. Now, conservatives, they move around a little to the left, a little to the right, but for the most part, they are drifting slightly to the right, just a little bit. Look, from here to here, it's not that big of a drift. But look at the liberal side. Tell me that's not, how many charts do I have to bring up where I can say you have different professors, different metrics that show the exact same thing? The left is going insane. Here we have 2000. There was still an overlap between the two parties. And then something happened after Obama. And we can see this massive split. And now the median is swung far to the left. So look, the most Democrats as of 2018 are here. And they're looking so far away at conservatives, saying they're far right. Because to them, the same distance, as I mentioned earlier, would put someone as a moderate liberal. To someone in 2018, right here, they would look at someone in 1980 and say, wow, they're a conservative. And there's more. I'm not done. This is another chart that I've shown from Quartz. Here we can see, going by only the House, in 2016, look at this. Look at this swing. Now people are saying, Tim, you're proving that Republicans were just really conservative. Yes, Republicans used to be way more spread out with center overlap, but further to the right. Over time, conservatives have kind of reined things in slightly towards a more unified position. There is a median drift. Look at this. You can see the Republicans drift the median slowly and slightly to the right. But over several decades, we can see that the most extreme the most far-right Republicans have actually come in as of the past 10 years. So let me stress this. You have about a 0.7 for the Democrats, and you have over 0.8 for Republicans. Over time, Republicans have brought things into 0.8. And while Democrats in 2016 were closer to the center than Republicans, the most extreme Republicans are, look what happens in 2018. These people over here, they're shifting the median, and they look to Republicans and say, you are far right. Now, some people are saying, oh, but this proves that Republicans have always been far to the right. Track the median, okay? And look, these are different metrics that track the same thing. This is a 10-item scale of political values. So what's happening is, very simply, I think part of this has to do with censorship, and I think it partly has to do with the susceptibility of young people to social media. No. So here's what we have. This is from the University of Missouri. We covered this on Subverse. I've covered it on this channel, my main channel. The Whisper Room. Moderates on Twitter are losing their voice, from April 3rd. The story basically says that it's the extreme left and right that are getting the most play. But who is more likely to be banned? When you get the most crazy sovereign citizen, ultra-traditionalist, white supremacist guy going on Twitter...
Why you gotta say white fucking supremacist of all those other values, Tim Pool? What is wrong with you?
They get banned in a heartbeat. What about Antifa? No, of course not. There are some personalities on the right that are accused of being grifters, of being the worst, of being nasty and offensive. And we'll name one, Milo, right? Milo's opinions are not that they're far right, but that they're kind of, I don't know the right way to, heavily and hyper-focused and extremely aggressive is probably a way to put it. He's very focused on key issues, one or two things, but admittedly, I don't even know what Milo's been doing this past, year and a half, 2 years. He's been really not doing a whole lot. He gets banned anyway. But there are some people on the left I won't name that have the same amount of followers, that have done the same thing he does, that regularly do the same thing he does. They say extremely offensive and racist things. They don't get banned. Take a look at Sarah Jung. She gets a job at the New York Times. If you're not familiar, Sarah Jung is the woman who for over 3 years, I believe, was posting racist tweets. She gets hired by The Verge. She gets hired by the New York Times. Congratulations. If you have two factions that are blasting their extremes, but Twitter is going to ban the right, Republicans will remove these people from committees like Steve King. That's his name, right? And the left will ignore, defend, or platform. What do you think's going to happen? The average person who just says, oh, whatever you say, I'll vote Democrat, are now falling in line and following suit. But regular people, moderates, and those who watch the news, people like me, are going to say, what are you doing? You're going crazy. So let's go back to this graph. Here we can see, right here, that there are a lot of conservatives, Republicans, I should say, who overlap with Democrat median. You know what that means? Well, let me explain something to you. Here's the median Democrat 94. I'm to the left of that. But guess what? We can see that some people, even though they're to the left of where Democrats are, they're still Republican. I don't view myself as a Republican. Not at all. I don't even view myself as a conservative.
Asshole.
Because I'm to the left of the Democrats who came before me. But I'm also not a brainwashed moron who takes Twitter seriously and thinks these people actually know what they're talking about. There are people on Facebook that I'm absolutely flabbergasted by because I've known them for years. They were at Occupy Wall Street, and they're arguing in favor of corporate oligopoly. I'm not exaggerating when I say that, and I am not taking them out of context. I posted this really long thread with facts, with statements from Supreme Court, with evidence of what was going on, and they say, I don't care. I don't care because you're, far right, you're whatever. They ignore it. They say, it doesn't matter. So you've got a Supreme Court ruling that social media is the public center and the cheapest and easiest to access in terms of listings, rentals, finding a job, staying up on current events. The Supreme Court unanimously recognized that. And that's something I found out from Will Chamberlain's Human Events article, which I think you should read on social media being platform access being a civil right. I post all these things. And then I say, listen, Twitter said in a story to Motherboard, they actively ban innocent Muslims via algorithm because they think the public will find it acceptable so long as their target is ISIS. So let me explain this. Twitter is saying, you know what, we want to ban these extremists, these people like ISIS. So they implement a program that grabs them and then grabs a bunch of innocent people, including television broadcasters. That's what they said on Motherboard. Did anyone on the left see that paragraph and go, whoa, 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 you can't ban people for simply being Arabic or Muslim? That's a violation of civil rights. Oh, sorry. Section 230, broad interpretation, provides a protection from civil rights law. The argument being, Twitter is under no obligation under the First Amendment to speak for someone else. The government can't mandate that you can come to me and say, you should say what I want you to say. And because Twitter is choosing to publish these things as a publisher, they shouldn't have to host content that they don't want to speak. It's a First Amendment defense. Things get really complicated. It does, and it's territory that has to be navigated very carefully. The point is, what the left ended up doing was saying they took that story and turned it into something else. Twitter refuses to ban, the far right. That's what they took out of it. For me, I'm like, Twitter just admitted they ban people simply for being Arabic, for speaking Arabic, or for being Muslim, and doing nothing else. And no one cares. And I posted this on Facebook, and what did they say? But my private platform. And I was shocked. I was like, wait, what? We're talking about Muslims being banned for no reason. We're talking about Twitter lumping regular Muslim private platform.
Yeah, bish.
Now, I've been watching the campaign of one Carl Benjamin, who's better known as the YouTuber Sargon of Akkad, and his bid for a seat in the European Parliament as a member of UKIP. Now, I do know Carl, as I've spoken to him a few times, but I am absolutely no expert on his video catalog. But what I can say is that while he does hold some right-leaning values, he believes in freedom of speech and is against mass uncontrolled immigration, he also holds left-leaning values, such as the use of the left's language and their belief that Nazis and fascists, while having been extinguished in 1945, still exist in 2019. While Sargon has long tried to tout his liberal credentials, going as far as attempting to start a club of some kind, as I remember, called the Liberalists, which, as far as I understand, was a collective of individualists, what his recent campaign for the European Parliament has shown is that it doesn't matter how much you punch right. It doesn't matter how much you say you don't identify with the political beliefs of Italy and Germany in the 1930s and 1940s. If you hold any values to the right of what is thoroughly the far left dominated media and the Marxist activists that go around masquerading as journalists today, well, they are the ones that decree what's legitimate morality or what's legitimate right think. And unfortunately, Sargon and his campaign are illustrative of the kind of reception you will get if you attempt to throw your hat in the ring for public office having the wrong opinions. And there is a reason why the media is throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at Sargon. And it's because as much as he rejects the label, the mainstream media see him as a conservative, and they know that the European Union's parliament, like most parts of the Western world today, are veering right as people are beginning to wake up to the absolute catastrophe that the collective world is careening toward in the very near future. Death knocking on several different doors.
Oh, man. Gamergate, CAC, Skeptics, Liberalist, UKIP, NPC meme. Oh no.
And destroying any sort of group of collectivists that he's joined as an individualist. Everything from Gamergate, CAC, skeptics, liberalists, UKIP, the NPC meme, and unfortunately a lot of people are now saying it's going to be Sargon's channel once the election is over, as Google and many of their executives have probably gotten wind of him and his ideas. Now, that having been said, he is on the right said to co-opt and monetize the memes of the right while at the same time attacking them from his fence. And while not flattering, this estimation of the man is not laced with malice, rage, or contempt. It's more like cringe. But for the left, he is literally becoming the personification of Hitler Jr. Now, Sargon has long been loathed by feminists, Antifa, far-left YouTuber personalities such as the bedraggled and oafish caricature of a hygiene-adverse, lazy socialist and feminist Kevin Logan. It was his bid, however, to become an MEP when the knives really came out. And while his fellow meme lord and comedian Mark Meacham, better known as Count Dankula, is also running as an MEP, and he is perhaps most famous as playing a prank on his girlfriend using her pug. And while he too is slandered in the media, the real mud-flinging has been reserved for Sargon. Where the left particularly despises and unreservedly hates Sargon is because of his opposition to political correctness. And I'm of the idea that Sargon has thousands of hours of content, and people can watch that content for themselves. But it is and has been a selected number of tweets and sound bites that the mainstream media has latched onto, where he uses such things as racial slurs, homophobic slurs, and has tweeted directly toward a female MP there in the UK. He's also, when they've also gotten a hold of a conversation that he had in which he spoke directly of pederasty of ancient Romans and Greeks and said that the age of consent depends on the child, well, the mainstream media went absolutely ballistic and basically slandered him in their headlines. Now, I understand that the media has its own agenda, but their litany of slanderous remarks that he was somehow in favor of sexually abusing boys is ludicrous. The media, I'm sure, for the simpletons that look at it for honest and unbiased information in the current year, are probably now believing in the caricature of Sargon as a raving bigot, and as a person he has been reduced to the rape man of Swindon who approves of diddling little boys. But what I want to show you is that these are actual headlines. Now UKIP candidate who said he wouldn't even rape a Labour MP says it's okay to sexually abuse boys. Or UKIP sex shame. Top UKIP candidate says it's okay to rape young boys in sick YouTube rant. Carl Benjamin is now being investigated by police over his bizarre comments about child sex. And you have to understand that this two-dimensional depiction and unrelenting slander of Sargon by the media, which is, as said, dominated by far-left activists that masquerade as journalists, it is illustrative of why so few people trust the Fourth Estate today. And they cite such things as Twitter having banned him in 2017, or his Patreon being banned in 2018 as some sort of justification or some sort of evidence of his villainous character. As you can see right here, crowdfunding platform Patreon defends itself from protests by the intellectual dark web, publishing slur-filled posts from banned YouTuber. But if anyone is paying attention and is fully aware, if anyone is paying attention and is fully aware of what is going on and the current conservative purge on social media, everyone from Gavin McInnes to James Woods is being sidelined. This is all in the run-up to 2020 and the ability of Silicon Valley to try and silence any voices that might counter the narrative that the Democratic Party is trying to push. And it's for this reason, and this is why the media is so terrified of the upcoming European parliamentary elections. They see and describe Sargon as some sort of alt-right personality with extremist far-right views. They're also aware of the rightward shift that the continent is headed toward as a result of the people's increasing displeasure at having socialist welfare states on the one hand and open borders on the other. The economic disparity, which is felt disproportionately by the young, and the never-ending increases on taxation, as well as the higher cost of living and stagnant wages. People are beginning to understand that the EU's Eurosceptic and right-leaning parties are polling very high for the upcoming elections. So high, in fact, that they are expected to make up the single largest faction in the EU Parliament should they unite into a single group. Now, the second largest faction based on the latest projections would be the establishment milquetoast conservatives, and the left and the socialist parties are coming in last and are both at losing ground. But as always, the media have to slander leaders such as Matteo Salvini and Viktor Orban as far right. And they're being they're called far right because they are for responsible immigration rather than open borders, and they are being called Eurosceptic on cue because they have been skeptical of the union thus far. And this is the interesting part, is because if you take a look at the mainstream media, what they do is they try and use language that is very, very divisive. What they do here is they label any such alliance of a far-leaning group. Excuse me, this page is kind of screwed up. Let's try to get it there. They're trying to, as you can see between the two shoe ad there, and I have been trying to fix this page, but it won't fix. But between the two shoe ads, you can see that the mainstream media is using the label of Axis to describe any sort of alliance between right-leaning parties. And we all know why they're using the word Axis deliberately. It's in the same vein that George W. Bush used it in the run-up to the Iraqi war, as he applied it to his axis of evil, that being North Korea, Iran, and Iraq. Also, while there are no assurances that there will be an alliance formed by the separate right-leaning parties, these elections are proof of the changing wind, and the repudiation of the narrative that's long been spun by the political class and the far-left activists that make up much of the mainstream media. Now, while there's some obvious and some very real hatred for Sargon on the left, when viewed through the calculative lens of the political stratagem, and that political stratagem is a smear campaign that the media are trying to tar Sargon with, it's entirely understandable from their point of view. Even though he denies the label, Sargon, whether he likes it or not, represents a rightward shift currently sweeping the continent. And I myself actually will be in the UK next week for some time and look forward to seeing how this all plays out. Interestingly enough, however, the article in this presentation that I cited back here of the EU election polls right-wing populist, if you take a look at it, if you go down to the right, one of the trending articles is, here we are, Carl Benjamin. Carl Benjamin is talking about raping Jess Phillips again. And if you click on over to that, you find this article. UKIP candidate Carl Benjamin said he might rape Labour MP Jess Phillips in a new video. And there's several other outlets that have picked up on this. Right here in the Sunday Times, I might rape MP Jess Phillips, says UKIP candidate Carl Benjamin. Now, what's interesting about this is if you go back here, this right here is trending higher. Carl Benjamin talking about raping Jess Phillips is trending higher than the Game of Thrones and Lady Gaga. And if anything, this should give you a very good idea of the vicious nature of the mainstream media and their scorched earth policy against anyone that goes against their socialist and their active narrative trying to suppress any ideas that are considered heretical to them, including free speech. Now, if you are currently in the constituency that Sargon or Count Dankula are hoping to represent in the EU Parliament, and even if you don't like them personally, I would urge you to go out and vote for them, because at least they aren't part of the establishment, as the establishment has clearly repudiated and despises these individuals. And also, the other thing to consider is that, remember that the European Commission are the people that decide who decide what will be voted on and when. Members of the EU Commission are appointed, not elected, and you can't remove them through the democratic process. And the same thing goes for
fucking
the
Hunter
EU president,
is camping
when
that area, not
Jean-Claude
sharing any of the
Juncker
spawns,
at the
I need the
current
spawns,
time
so
of
I'm gonna
publishing
kill
this
some fucking
video.
alliance
And as I
instead.
remember, he's now trying to push the idea and float the idea that Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, once she retires from her post, should consider running for that position
Nope.
as well.
Fucking
or
be quiet, priest.
Considered to be appointed to that, and that should be quite interesting. But what all this means is that, and something that you have to understand, is that the EU is not undemocratic.
Drop a spit on him.
It's actively anti-democratic. And again, why the media calls anyone skeptical of the EU as far right is that they themselves are actively
Say
undemocratic.
nigga a few times too.
So, thanks for watching this video. I appreciate it. If you liked it and would like to see more content like it, please consider subscribing. Also, you can follow Black Pigeon on the usual social media as
Okay, Black Pigeon, we got it. Hey, I'm taking requests, YouTuber. Why don't you throw a link in chat and I'll play it. As long as it's not porn. Give me some nice dank weeb shit. Some really deep fried memes.
Burger King has gone full cringe. I used to highly respect the scientific nature of marketing. Marketers have come a long way in being able to manipulate, influence, and, let's be honest, create propaganda for people, to sell their products, to push a message. But it seems like in recent years, all sorts of companies have gone woke. They've hired absolutely inept people with gender studies degree and other pointless degrees. And now marketing has become a joke.
Bot.
Seriously.
I swear to God, this is a
Burger
bot. How
King
do we report
recently
somebody for
released
botting?
this ad. It's called Burger King, Feel Your Way. And I think by the time we're done with this, we're not going to be calling it Burger King
Requested a
anymore,
duel.
but Burger Cringe.
Not everybody wakes up happy.
Well, I certainly don't. But you don't see me bitching.
Sometimes you feel sad, scared, crappy.
That's every day for me.
All I ask is that you let me feel my way.
This is a Burger King ad? You shitting me?
I don't know if you understand this, but there's literally no one stopping you from feeling anything. And in a lot of respects, you get to choose how you feel. If you feel bad, you can amp yourself up. It's what I often do. Emotional states can be manipulated. Ooh. Nobody likes a sourpuss. This commercial's really weird.
So far, I'm not thinking burgers.
Feeling blue. Kinda down.
I think they're trying to connect to the whole fucking depressed, suicidal nation we have right now.
Can't wait to leave this closed-minded town.
You know, I love the... I was actually on her side. Like, why would you bully a redhead? Redheads are awesome. But, I can't wait to leave this closed-minded town. What did she do? Based on what was written on the locker, I'm guessing that this woman is sleazy. And now she's sad because she's being called out on it. I mean, that's literally the implication there. What did she do? I'm curious. Burger King, give me a story. Move me.
Closed-minded town.
My boss is such a freaking creep. I just told him to go himself.
Now this is probably the most unrealistic part of the commercial, because in real life, she would have just have complained to HR, the boss would have been reprimanded and fired, his entire career and reputation ruined. Also, you called him a creep, but what did he do? Again,
come here, warrior.
Text in this video. That's not there. I really want to know.
And I'm feeling real happy, not all angry, just not happy.
I can't believe my student loan. I'm never moving out of my parents' home.
Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you got the loan in the first place. Again, that was your...
Bro, you can't blame it on people are being indoctrinated into a system where they're told, look, the more time you spend in college, the more money you make. Every year you spend in post-high school education is another 9% more money you'll make in life. And meanwhile, they'll never tell you correlation is not causation.
Your own decision. And that's the crazy thing about this commercial. A lot of it just looks like their own consequences of their own decisions.
Just got ghosted. Should've known.
Racism.
Pretty sure I'll end up alone.
I mean, that's fair, but who would get this sad? Shrug and move on.
They say I'm too young to raise my baby girl. Take your opinions and suck it, world.
What does that mean? Do you have a dad? Where's the father? How come you're not married to him? Why is that a good thing?
Wow, girl in the world. I mean, I don't think anyone actually thinks that she's too young to raise a child. I think what they're saying is you probably shouldn't have a child too young. And mostly for economic reasons these days. The female body is capable of producing children surprisingly sooner than you think. Doesn't mean you should. Feel my way. Oh.
How is this a Burger King ad? What? 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 What is this? Real meals.
Oh Lord, there's a lot to
That is a great Burger King commercial. I've never wanted to eat burgers so badly.
unpack there. First of all, let's take a look at these meals. No one is happy all the time, and that's okay. No shit. Everybody knows this, but this is practically glorifying negative emotions. I don't get what they're selling here. It's really weird. And look at the name of these meals. Look here. Blue
Salty.
meal. Apparently, if you're sad, you get the blue little box. And this has to be the worst one. Yas meal. Oh boy, oh boy. The cringe is I feel it in my bone marrow. God, it's such a cancerous term. I don't think I've heard anyone but millennials and Zoomers use it. It's really cringy. I automatically assume you don't have an IQ higher than 90. And that's probably true in a lot of cases. The pissed meal. Yeah, the angry box. Who thought of this? Salty meal. Salty? I'm feeling salty. Salty. That just sounds like it's too salty. Like there's salt in the food. And then the don't give a F meal. Yeah. I don't even have a comment for that. Real meals. This has to be one of the weirdest campaigns I've ever seen, largely because it's not going to resonate with anyone. And, you know, this might actually have been kind of cool if the different foods for different moods. Oh my God, I literally just came up with a better slogan than Burger King. Compared to them, I'm a marketing genius. Different foods for different moods. Like each box would have a different assortment of goodies. But actually, there's only two basic meals. It's like a Whopper or a burger and fries, and that's it. The only thing different is the box. I've never...
I'm Greg.
Greg, nice to meet you, Greg.
Yeah,
It's called marketing, bro.
So I wanted to change gears a little bit. It's a little bit of a less heavy thing than crime statistics or Brexit and that kind of thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about creative freedom and kind of liberalism, if that's cool. I have a question for you, but it's a question I kind of know the answer to, but I think it might be useful to discuss a little bit.
Sure.
I'll explain anyway. So my entry point into kind of your stuff and kind of the culture war and politics more widely is through censorship. I studied film A-level in Swindon, actually, and sort of saw the censorship cases and protests with films like The Exorcist, The Life of Brian, Then when I did degree level, I looked at the 1980s video nasty era, Mary Whitehouse, the history of the British Board of Film Classification and how censorious they are. So I've kind of always had a bee in my bonnet about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when I noticed it happening more in sort of 2014, 2015, there was the thing with the scientist Matt Taylor's shirt and that kind of thing. I read John Ronson's book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which I'd recommend to people as well.
Yep.
And so I was like, well, stuff is going too far. And then I saw your video, Illiberal Progressives, which is quite an early one now.
It is, yeah.
And the individual versus collectivism one, and the one on neo-progressive activists, which I would recommend to people as a good entry point out of your thousands of videos.
Yeah.
Because they explain a lot of what's going on and will help people understand that. So, yeah, so at that point I was like, oh, I read Locke and Mill and I was like, this is my jam, I'm this type of liberal, the you and Brendan O'Neill type of liberal. So that's always been my, the thing that's got me all like, not on my watch kind of thing. That's that's my area of focus.
Well, honestly, I'm glad I managed to get you out into the streets. That's because it matters. You know, if we don't speak up, then our freedoms will continue to be eroded.
Yeah. So I say that to kind of say this.
Oh God!
Given that I think there might be, I suspect there's quite a lot of people out there who are like me. Maybe not your typical audience so much. Maybe not the typical involved in politics people so much, but kind of lefty, arty, outside the box, weird people.
Yeah.
Who and I've met a lot who don't understand why the censorship is happening, why the creative possibilities they have are being closed in on, and that kind of thing, and who aren't like me following all the individual cases of everything. But I suspect they would agree with you on these things and connect maybe through that topic specifically.
Yeah.
So the question I want to ask is, why is liberalism specifically, the set of ideas, the best way to ensure that people like me and other weirdos out there can keep making whatever we want and watching whatever films we want, and you know, more broadly, there's cool stuff for everyone to enjoy and be inspired by, and art and stuff.
Well,
so why is it the best way to preserve the like flourishing of those cycles of creativity?
Well, honestly, I mean, what are your options? You know, liberalism is the only philosophy that supports free. I mean, it's the philosophy that believes in free speech. I mean, look at all the other ones. You've got progressives who will happily censor any kind of what they consider to be offensive speech.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely not the answer.
Absolutely. And then you've got the conservatives who are happy to preserve the progressive world order of hate speech laws and gross offence on the books. I mean, the conservatives have been in power for, 8-9 years now? They could have got rid of this anytime they wanted, but they haven't.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, good grief, you know, you certainly can't look to any kind of more theocratic positions for any solution on that.
They're
You
all
can't
very
look
censorious as well. They all have their rules of how they want society to be and
they
things
turn
they
these
want to achieve.
and they term these things as blasphemy. I mean, look at Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah.
You know, it's liberalism that provided the platform for things like this to flourish. And without liberalism, these things will just go the way of the dinosaur. They'll be a relic of the past. And people who are creative types, artists, you know, musicians, anyone who's creating anything, will find themselves chafing at state-sponsored censorship. And I mean, if we want a free world where you are free to express yourself, I don't see how we can be anything other than liberals. So it's definitely something that I'm very, very keen to push, as you can see, and as you've said from the videos, and it's definitely something that UKIP as a party is very aware of. You know, I don't think that any of the other parties in this country support free speech at all.
I just see all of them trying, like, regardless of your political position, I just see all of them trying to shut it down in different ways. Nobody's actually saying, like, oh, we have this important thing in our history, our traditions of the history of British art and creative freedom and our weird eccentric types that we've had throughout history and who make amazing stuff that we still enjoy to this day. Like, I don't see anyone standing up for that, and it's kind of frightening to me, to be honest.
Well, honestly, I'm terrified of it, and I really think that if we want the freedom to be eccentric and to make strange and interesting things and to make the world a cooler place,
well, that's the fun stuff.
Exactly, that's the
interesting
stuff.
The weirdos are the fun, interesting people. They come up with the stuff.
Exactly, and we've got to protect these people's rights to express themselves as they want. I mean, like, I'm not a fan of Andy Warhol's art, but my God, I'm glad that he's free to do it, or he was free to do it.
Of course. There's tons of art that I don't like. There's tons of films and music and sculptures I don't like. I just don't go and check them out. I just focus on the things I like and just think, fair enough, that's for someone else. They should have the right to make whatever they want.
Exactly, but I want these people to be able to enjoy these strange things. I think it's good that they exist. Now, who knows? Maybe at some point in my life I'll find appreciation for them, and I'll be glad that they're there.
Of course.
But if the censors get their way, then they won't.
No one
be
can
there.
appreciate them.
Exactly.
Even people who would like them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Honestly, free speech is one of the drums I've been beating for a long time now, because I think it really is. I mean, it's a human right. From what we consider to be a human right in the EU, the UN, the British unwritten constitution, we all recognise this, and yet it is trampled on every day and in various other legislative ways. So we've really, and not last but not least, social media, which I'm sure you're aware of Article 13. Any kind of transformative content that you intend to put on the internet, Article 13, the European Union.
Very bad news for anyone that's creative in nearly any creative field.
Absolutely. Anyone who is not part
it's a serious thing.
Anyone who's not part of the sort of the establishment in that regard, any independent artists, they should be very concerned about this. And this is what Julia Rieder of the Pirate Party in Germany has been very, very active on social media. And she's been an absolute star when it comes to this. But it's coming, and people are going to be very surprised when they can't upload a GIF or an image, a macro or something like that to whatever social media platform they're using because of EU regulations. So it's something that we've got to watch out for. And again, we need to get out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and with the more censorious attitude generally, I mean, I've got friends who are in different creative fields or artistic fields who aren't tuned into this stuff, and I've spoken to them, and they're like, well, why are these mobs of people, often in another country, telling me what art I'm allowed to make or what I'm allowed to write about? What are they doing? I've had to explain, it's this new strain of kind of authoritarian leftism that's come in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's kind of a new thing. And this is what they want. These are their principles. This is how they want the world to be. And this is why they're going around shutting down everyone's art and stuff. And it's confusing to people who don't know where it's coming from. It's like,
you're exactly right. And it generally is people in other countries as well who go around and harass online various businesses or wherever
tech companies, wherever it is,
art galleries, wherever it's being hosted, and they just browbeat them into submission. And like you say, this is bad for the artists, the creator themselves, who are
regardless of their political ideology.
Exactly.
If you make things, it's bad for you. It's like
that's absolutely right. So vote UKIP. We're the only party who cares about free speech.
Cool. All right. Good sortie.
Cheers, man. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is an entirely self-indulgent moment, I'm afraid, but you're going to have 2 people introducing today's lecture. I was supposed to be hosting this event for Robert today, but as you may have heard, I got asked to do a piece of work by the government, and I don't actually know what's involved, and finally Downing Street have asked me to come in so they can tell me what's involved. So I think I ought to go to that meeting, really, because I'm a bit embarrassed about telling people I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm having to go there, which means I won't be chairing the event. But I wanted just to welcome Robert, because I've been here nearly 10 years now, and when I came, one of the first things I wanted to do was to bring in some new types of speakers to our events. And my recollection is that the first one of those events that really felt it was different and we were talking about different kinds of things was you, Rob, when you came 10 years ago. And ever since then, I think our events programme has gone from strength to strength. But I'll always be grateful to you for starting it all off. And I will now hand over to Rowan Conway, who has got the privilege of chairing today.
They deliver that message, right? And putting us in a frame of mind that is aligned with the central element of that message. Now, I want to talk about this in a couple of ways. I want to talk about it today, first of all, in a way that convinces you of the power of this process, and secondly, that allows you to harness that power in your own attempts to achieve your professional goals. So let's begin with an example that comes not from a professional setting, but from a more personal setting, because I want to show the universality of this principle. And it has to do with a study that was done in France. Researchers had a pretty young woman approach middle-aged men who were walking down a street and ask for help with directions to a street. About 100 yards later, they were approached by another attractive young woman, right, who had a much larger request. She said, "You see those 4 guys over there?" And she pointed to 4 tough-looking young men. "They've taken my cell phone, and they won't give it back. Could you go get it for me?" Well, the majority of these guys said, "Are you crazy?" They didn't know this mademoiselle. They didn't know if that was really her phone. And if in any confrontation, they would be outnumbered 4-1. So the great majority of them, 80%, said, no, thank you. I'm not going to help. All right. So we see that in this particular sample of middle-aged men walking alone, only 20% said yes. 20% is still impressive, but we would know why. That was an attractive young woman. Physical attractiveness leads to yes when a communicator has that particular trait. Right? But there was a second sample of
Without the First Lady?
Who were nearly twice as likely to go to the damsel's distress. 37% of them launched themselves into this confrontation. What was the difference? You remember what happened to these men 100 meters earlier? Yards. We're still in. I was just in Warsaw. I was talking in meters. Yards earlier. Right? They were asked for directions. The first sample was asked for directions to Martin Street, the second sample to Valentine Street. Why did that make a difference? Because previous research showed that being asked about directions to Valentine Street put men in mind of a romantic holiday, Valentine's Day. And when they were in an amorous state of mind, romance became more important to them than danger. Now, just to be sure that this wasn't an example of some form of middle-aged male foolishness, these researchers tried the same thing with women as the subjects. In this case, young women who were walking in a shopping mall. Oh, wait a minute, before we do that, let me ask you this question. What percentage of those guys, those 37%, right, who said yes, what percentage of them do you think recognized that they had been moved by that persuasive action of being asked for directions to Valentine Street? Notice that the big increase wasn't because of physical attractiveness. Something else was required to produce. In other words, a persuasive step. They had to be asked about something that was associated with romance in order to prioritize romance now. What percentage do you think recognized that? How many people would say everybody did? How many people would say, oh, well, maybe half? Half, right? How many, a quarter of them would recognize? Right? How many? Okay, 10%. None. No one. No one. That's what makes this such an unconscious process. We don't recognize its influence on us because it comes before the request. We're not focused on the moment before. We're focused here on the request. And so this flies under the radar. Makes it important for us to think about the ethics of this process. But let's go back to that situation I was describing in a shopping mall in France. Right? This time, the researchers, it was the same researchers, they had, instead of an attractive young woman, a very attractive young man who walked up to women who were passing various shops in the mall and stopped them, gave them a compliment, and asked for their phone number so he could call to arrange a date later. Another risky request. To give a phone number to a perfect stranger who simply approaches in a shopping mall? Risky. Right? And under those circumstances, depending on the shop, as people were passing various shops, these young women, a shoe store, a clothing boutique, a pastry shop, right? The young man had very little success, only about 13.5% of the time. Did he actually get a phone number? But when the young women were passing another kind of shop, right, his success doubled almost.
Can I help you?
Any idea what that shop would be?
What would get women? Motherhood?
Alrighty then.
Marriage?
Chocolates? No, not quite. A romantic state of mind. They are associated with maternity? No, not maternity. Flower shop. Why? Because flowers are associated with romance. And when they were put in a romantic state of mind, romance became more important than risk for them. Think about this. We're able to change who people are in the moment after we focus their attention on a particular idea. You can make me a romantic by presenting information, drawing my attention to information about romance. In that moment, you will have changed who I am. I am now a romantic in a way that I wasn't before. Now, one more thing about this study that I like. It's that afterward, the young women were asked, of all the shops that you passed, which were the products inside that you liked the most? Right? And their answer was the pastries. But the pastries didn't produce phone numbers. Flowers produced phone numbers. Why? Because romance is associated with flowers, not frosted donuts, right? You see how the alignment of what is made top of consciousness, top of mind in the moment before the request is crucial to the success of that request. The alignment has to be right. Okay. Now, let's talk about how this would apply, how a communicator would apply this in other, perhaps professional settings. Because, ladies, I'm pretty sure that the most important persuasive appeals that you make in your professional lives don't involve getting your cell phone back on the streets of Marseille. And gentlemen, I'm going to assume that the most important persuasive appeals for you don't involve getting phone numbers from romantic possibilities in a shopping mall, right? Gentlemen? So what can we do as communicators? Here's what a communicator does to engage the process of persuasion most effectively. It occurs in two steps. The first is to identify the precise goal of the communication. What is it that is the strength, the purpose of this communication? What is it designed to accomplish? And then to create a mindset in the recipient of the message that hasn't even occurred yet. The message hasn't occurred. Right? That is consistent with that goal, right? Through the words, situations, or images that are presented in that earlier moment. We've already talked about two of these words. The word Valentine, the situation, flower shop. Let's consider another goal, more professional. The goal of creating top performance from others and ourselves, and see how images can create that effect. The goal of generating top performance, that's something we want for ourselves. We want that for our teams. Right? And in many business settings that I've visited, there are often posters on the walls that cue the idea of top performance. Call centers tend to be one. You see these kinds of posters. How many of you have seen these posters?
Motivational
been in
posters.
Offices that maybe
Yes.
your own. Right.
They're a
A
meme.
lot of people think that this is silly to do this. I was one of those people. Always thought it was only laughable that having a poster that says achievement or challenge or conquer or dream big would make a difference. There are other kinds of posters. Sometimes you just see the word conquer, right? Overcome, succeed. Sometimes you just see a photograph, just the image, like this one, a runner winning a race. I always thought that was laughable. Not anymore. Because I have seen a study that was done by some Canadian researchers. Right? They went to a call center. We see these kinds of posters all the time. And they arranged for the callers who were trying to get contributions. That particular day, they were calling to get contributions for a local university from former alumni. And they were given a sheet of topics to cover in their presentation once they got one of these potential donors on the phone, a tip sheet. Right? And half of them were given that tip sheet to call, and it was on plain paper. And they gained about $217 during the 3-hour shift they next engaged in. Another group was given that same sheet of topics with the background of that runner winning the race. 3 hours later, they had averaged about 60% better performance, because the concept of success, of achievement, was made prominent in their consciousness before they began the task. Now, that's a little unsettling, but remarkable, right, to me. And I asked the question to myself, but maybe how long could this last? How long could it be that you see this image and that influences? Well, those researchers then did another study that answered my question. They had the same thing happen for 4 days, right? And they found the same increase on the 4th day as they did on the 1st day. Okay. So as long as we are gaining access to a particular concept, a particular idea, that is going to focus our attention in a way that makes subsequent activity, subsequent information congruent with that idea. All right. Now, that's for one particular kind of top performance, but there are other kinds of top performance that don't require some kind of energy-fueled, persistent drive toward a goal, but require a different kind of performance. Deliberation, analysis, considered concern about the details or the complexity of a problem, where you don't want to just rush through it, you want to step back from it and consider it in all of its complexity. So these Canadian researchers did a second study to see if they could energize top performance for that kind of task. Right? What they did was to give business students a set of difficult problems to solve, right? Ask them to solve a set of these problems within a certain amount of time. And for some, they were shown essentially a nature scene in the background of the computer while they were doing this task. This is the kind of thing that we typically put on the screens of our computers. Another group was given, indeed, this energy-fueled kind of success image. But remember, they wanted deliberation. They wanted concentrated analysis here. Any idea what kind of image would be associated with that they could use?
Chess?
Here's the one that the Canadian researchers chose. Rodin's The Thinker.
No.
Now, each were given the opportunity to solve these problems, and let's look at the number that they got correct within this period. Nature scene, about 6.6.
Control.
Runner winning the race.
Running.
The one that had been so successful previously. Nothing significant. But Rodin's Thinker, slowly, 9.3%. Now it's a 48%. So once again, we see the precision that has to be involved here. The alignment has to be right between what it is that you put in the moment before and what comes next. All right. Now, I know we're almost out of time, so let me talk about one more goal. Creating a feeling of unity or togetherness. Right? That's a big issue that we all have. Right? Before we leave that one, let me suggest that earlier one on performance. This isn't just something that we get to use on others. We get to use this on ourselves. Do you have a task that requires a lot of persistence and energy and drive? Put a picture of a runner winning the race in the corner of the... You have one that requires a lot of analysis, deliberation. Put a picture of Rodin's Thinker. You will do better in both instances, provided that you change the image, the cue that is steering you into that activity. Right? Now, let's talk about this one. This is establishing a feeling of togetherness, something we all want to do in our teams, sometimes even with people that we deal with outside of our organizations. We want that sense of commonality and unity. And a study was done in Belgium, right, that makes the case of how this one might be generated. Researchers had subjects come into an experiment. 1/3 of them were shown photographs of household objects, and in the background of the objects was a single figure standing alone. Another third, in the background were two figures standing apart from one another, separate. A final third, those same two figures standing shoulder to shoulder, together. All right. Activating, raising to consciousness the idea of togetherness, collaboration, cooperation. Then, in all instances, the researcher got up from the table and accidentally dropped a series of items onto the floor. And the question is, now, who gets down on their knees spontaneously, without being asked, and helps the researcher pick these items up? Who has been stimulated into the notion of togetherness and cooperativeness, right? And as you can guess, I'm sure by now, those who saw someone standing alone, 20% helped. Those saw people standing apart, 20%. Those who saw those figures standing together, 3 times as much. We've done it again, but we've changed the idea. We've changed the concept that was top of mind and produced the consequent behavior that's congruent with that concept. Now, this study rocked me back in my chair when I read it. Not because of these results, because by the time I had read this study, I had already seen those other kinds of results that we've been talking about. Because of something about the subjects in this experiment. The subjects, including those who were 3 times as likely to help because they saw an image of togetherness, the subjects were 18-month-old children, hardly able to speak, to talk, barely able to review or reflect or reason. And they were powerfully mobilized by this process of persuasion. It tells us how fundamental, how primitive this process is, how it operates at us at very basic levels. All right, let me finish with one more example of how you might employ this idea of togetherness without having to show people images of individuals standing shoulder to shoulder. Suppose you want support from someone who will be helpful in the future if you can get that person's support for a new idea or an initiative or a program that you have in mind. And one thing that we are trained to do is to go to that person and ask for that person's opinion on an early draft or a blueprint of this idea. What do you think about this, right? That's a mistake. Not to go to that person. The mistake is to ask for his or her opinion. Because what the research tells us is that when you ask for someone's opinion, that person takes a half step back from us psychologically and goes inside, introspects, separates from us. If instead you ask for that person's advice persuasively, he or she takes a half step toward us in a collaborative state of mind. They now encounter our evidence. And the evidence of the research is quite clear. They now become more supportive of our idea because we have made them a part of it, cause them to step into that idea with us rather than back from us as a dispassionate reviewer of that idea. Small thing, one small change produces the effect. Okay, let's wind up here. This is the evidence that they showed that when people say, give me your opinion, and they rate how they and the other individual are together, they separate. When you ask for their advice, they rate themselves as closer to the other person. It's not that, oh, when I was asked for my advice, I considered myself more helpful. No, asked about opinion, asked about advice, produces the same level of perceived helpfulness. The difference is the perceived unity that asking for advice rather than, right? So there's an old saying that when you ask for someone's advice, you're usually asking for an accomplice, right? Here's what the behavioral research says. If you get that advice, you get that accomplice. Okay, let's finish. All right, here's, right, a communicator can change what I'm paying attention to, and in the process, change who I am in that moment. If you are that communicator, I'll be at your disposal in that moment. Therefore, we would both benefit from knowing more about this process. And I hope that the information you've heard today begins to help provide that knowledge in this regard. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Service, our idea, a lot of experience in that arena. Right? We should put the idea of authority or expertise or competence, that should be the image. So people will go to the thing that is most true and most representative of what we have to offer, that makes it wise for them to move in that direction.
Hell yeah, found it.
The other thing is to be sure that as an organization, we don't allow the individuals inside our organization to use these strategies in an unethical way, because I think there are very consequential and negative outcomes associated with an organization that allows itself to have an unethical culture.
Absolutely. I was thinking, did that guy go out with the 24% of people who said yes and gave him their number?
It was all part of a research study, so none of them.
None of them got a date.
But I have to say, I had the same kind of pause when I saw those results. Is this informing people of ways to use persuasion as an artifice, as a device to get goals that are not in the best interests of the recipient, but only in the best interests? I have real concerns about that.
Because I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's about mutuality rather than about sort of unilateral power in that way.
Oh man, come on.
Because emotions are involved in those decision making. I'm interested.
Also risk. We got people to take risky stances.
Yeah, you got 4 blokes he was going to have a fight with. You know?
Yeah.
That's quite challenging.
Risky.
We are seeing, since the arrival of sort of behavioural sciences and the nudge unit over here, starting to look at these ways that these can be deployed in public sector arena as well as this. These are tools that have been used traditionally in the corporate sector or in a corporate environment. Is there a different way? Are there different things or concerns that need to be thought about between the corporate sector and the public sector?
Yeah. So we did a series of studies to suggest that in the corporate sector we have to be particularly concerned about this, but that's where we did the research. But in the private sector as well, I mean, excuse me, the governmental public sector as well, because trust of one's citizenry is the basis for a democracy. If we start running games, tricks on the citizenry of a country, that puts at peril the very basis of a democratic.
Oh my God! This guy is so fucking woke! Holy shit! I gotta record this guy. Hold on. Hold on. Hold up. Hold on. No.
This, but that's where we did the research. But in the
that need to be thought about. Is there a different way? Are there different things or concerns that need to be thought about between the corporate sector and the public sector?
Yeah. So we did a series of studies to suggest that in the corporate sector we have to be particularly concerned about this, but that's where we did the research. But in the private sector as well, I mean, excuse me, the governmental public sector as well, because trust of one's citizenry is the basis for a democracy. If we start running games, tricks on the citizenry of a country, that puts at peril the very basis of a democratic and willing exchange between the government and the citizens themselves. So that's something that we have to be very careful about. And I think the Nudge Unit, for the most part here in the UK, has been mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. No, it's definitely been looking at that kind of process improvement rather than actually trying to be persuasive necessarily in other ways.
Right.
I'm going to come to the floor, so please start putting your hands up. So I will come to the lady in the front here, then the gentleman in the middle, and then the gentleman with the paper coming up, but I'm going to ask one more question before we do that. We're at a particularly interesting time, specifically in political debate, both here, but right now, you know, there was an election debate yesterday. How do you think political candidates can use these tools without, as you say, trying to unnerve the populace, engage more effectively with audiences?
I'll tell you something that the Obama campaign did very successfully back in 2008 when no one knew this guy. He's a one-term senator from Illinois, not a very prominent figure in politics, and all of a sudden this African-American guy who no one knew produced a lot of uncertainty in people about whether they should support him. And one of the things that we know from behavioral science is that to reduce uncertainty, people look around at how many other people have decided to do something that they're being encouraged to do. And what the Obama campaign did that was brilliant, right, was to, instead of having the candidate stand behind a set of flags of the United States, there was a sea of faces that was arranged so that every demographic category was represented in that face. You saw Asians, you saw old people, you saw young people, You saw people dressed in suits and ties. You saw people in T-shirts. The idea was, look at all of the people who have decided that this is the right guy, and I can find myself in there. There will be someone in there who looks like me. The second thing they did that I haven't seen anybody do since, and nor before. In the United States, every political campaign has to announce how much money they received, right, in any given month or quarter, right, from donors. And what the campaigns always did was to respond to that particular directive. Tell us how much money you've given. They all did that. What the Obama campaign did, before they stated the amount, they stated the number of contributors. Look at all of the people who have contributed to us. It reduced uncertainty that this was someone we should be considering seriously, at least someone whose attention who deserves our attention because of the multitude who have already decided to do this. That was a brilliant, persuasive strategy on their part, I thought.
Absolutely. Okay, have you been given a microphone?
Angela Harvey, I'm a fellow. I was going to ask that very same question, so I'm going to switch to what should have happened in the referendum here, therefore,
should have
that
happened.
got a slightly different result to the one that people expected.
Should.
Yeah, and I'm not as familiar with UK politics, but if I were to take a persuasive approach to this, those who wanted stay, right, should have elevated to consciousness. This vote should have been about all the things that are associated with stability, predictability, exchange, international cooperation. These kinds of things should not just have been in their messages. They should have been made top of consciousness before the message about each of those things was delivered. There should have been symbols. This approach with...
So I'm... Angela Harvey, I'm a fellow. I was going to ask that very same question, so I'm going to switch to what should have happened in the referendum here, therefore, that got a slightly different result to the one that people expected.
Yeah, and I'm not as familiar with UK politics, but if I were to take a persuasive approach to this, those who wanted stay, right, should have elevated to consciousness. This vote should have been about all the things that are associated with stability, predictability, exchange, international cooperation. These kinds of things should not just have been in their messages. They should have been made top of consciousness before the message about each of those things was delivered. There should have been symbols, there should have been words, there should have been situations depicted that created that mindset, because that mindset channels people into the concept that is aligned with that mindset and gives it special leverage, special traction when the message itself is delivered.
Gentlemen, do you have a microphone?
Hi, thank you. This is Viren from Chain School. I just wanted to understand, is what you're talking about taking the notion of priming further in terms of aligning it with communicators' goals or motives, or is it something quite different? Sorry, it's new to me.
It's very much alike priming. So not everyone knows priming, but it's very similar to what I'm suggesting. what you activate in a person's consciousness at any one time then colors their perceptions and directs their perceptions in a way that is congruent. Now, that also applies to other kinds of literatures within behavioral science, the literature on framing, the literature on anchoring, and so on. So what I talk about is, rather than primes, I talk about openers. How do we open the moment before our message so that people are now receptive to it? I don't know if you noticed in my very first frame, there was a door that opened. That was, I wanted that image to be part of the consciousness of the audience, because I was talking about something that required a new way of thinking, something that required us to open ourselves to an idea that hadn't really been widely communicated before. Yeah. So I plead guilty to employing the same strategy.
I think it's interesting. I had another question that builds exactly on that. In your book, you talk about the media's use of these kind of tools, and you talked about how issues that gain attention gain kind of presumed importance, which is that same sort of priming arena. There was one interesting thing that you talk about, where you talk about the embedded reporter program in the Iraq War that was sponsored, I believe, by the US military to some degree. You talk about
the thing that I plead guilty to employing the same strategy.
I think it's interesting.
Great content, I know right now. What the fuck?
Guilty to employing the same strategy.
I think it's interesting. I had another question that builds exactly on that. In your book, you talk about the media's use of these kind of tools, and you talked about how issues that gain attention gain kind of presumed importance, which is that same sort of priming arena. There was one interesting thing that you talk about, where you talk about the embedded reporter program in the Iraq War that was sponsored, I believe, by the US military to some degree. And it was incredibly persuasive. It had a profound impact, and it dominated the news. It also, to a certain extent, it limited the range of debate around the conduct of war rather than the wisdom of war. So you are framing the debate when you use these tools ubiquitously. So I'm interested in how, when using these tools, or how we can think about to ensure that public debate is not narrowed by too much orchestration, but actually can still be flourish in a wider range of ideas and diverse thought.
Well, I think we can count on our opinion opponents to be sure that their points are part of the consciousness. But I think, again, in terms of how we can do this in a way that is justifiable, is to ask people to think about those features of our message that make it wisest for them to move in our directions, that are our strengths. Right? So we focus them on our strengths, and they are informed about the best arguments in our camp. Our opponents can focus them on other arguments, but I think that's the job of a communicator, to be sure that people are not focused away from the central issues that ought to be in mind when they make a decision. Very often, and we're seeing this in the United States now with the campaigns, people's focus is not on the issues. It's on the entertainment value and the outrageous character of the very many aspects of the debate. That's a mistake. We need to be sure that people think about those debates in terms not of these superficial and extraneous factors, but on the ones that are going to make the most difference for us as a society.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the gentleman over there with the card held up, and then if you can pass your mic back to the lady behind you. Oh, no, that's now gone in a different way. So the lady there in that third row, and then we'll come to you. So.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether the implication of the last example you gave us about togetherness was, in fact, an indication that we should all live under socialism.
There in that third row, and then we'll come to you. So.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether the implication of the last example you gave us about togetherness was, in fact, an indication that we should all live under socialism.
There you go.
Hardly. I think what we could say is that in a capitalistic exchange, what we want is people who are willing to compromise, who are willing to be of assistance to one another, to cooperate and collaborate, rather than to take an adversarial point of view. And we're more likely to produce joint benefit under those circumstances. So I don't think that it's one or the other, but I'll give you an example, a personal one. We have a business, and we talk about, we have clients who are interested in learning about the science of influence. We were having a meeting with one set of clients, and typically what happens is we bring our team into the meeting room, and we sit at one end of the table, and then the clients come in and they bring their team and they sit at the other end of the table, right? On the other side. That's the geography of separation. That's the geography of difference. So what I asked my team to do is to take every other chair around the table. And now when our clients came in, they sat among us. And we had a very profitable negotiation. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but this is the sort of thing that we can do within an exchange in which we both want good things, but we can do so by structuring the situation so that at top of mind is the idea of cooperation.
Sounds a bit like socialism.
Lady there.
Hello, I'm Penny Bickerstaff. I'm a fellow here too, and I guess that's really helpful that you went into the meeting place, because I was wanting to ask a kind of micro question. I spend a lot of time with clients where it's not really so much that you want to get them in a particular frame of mind about the topic, it's that you want to, if possible, reduce their understandable feelings of mistrust, or not liking strangers, or not really being open to having the conversation. It's more of a kind of getting rid of a negative rather than creating a positive, and we have done the seating thing. But I'm just wondering whether you think we can do better than talk about sport and the weather to do that.
I think we can. So we've got partners, they can be colleagues, they can be business partners, they can be clients and so on. We have an existing relationship. We have a collaborative history with these individuals. Point to it before the negotiation begins. Point to the fact that we have a history, we have a relationship. To those in their long
called subliminal advertising, you may recall it. We also have recently the General Data Protection Regulations coming into force in May 2018, and they require organisations to exhibit transparency about the commercial model and the behaviours that they're undertaking with their customers, and they also require informed consent for certain types of activities to be undertaken. What you're talking about with persuasion is very, very powerful influencing model, but I wonder if simply saying one must consider the ethics is enough. How do we make clear that persuasion is being used as a technique to create the right environment, assuming everybody's motivations are good? How do we actually monitor this so that it is not used for inappropriate purposes?
Okay, 2 points to that question. One is directly related, and that is, instead of providing consumer protection or information programs designed to get people, recipients, to focus on what is in the message, we need to tell them to focus on what is in the moment before they've received their message. There's influence, there's leverage there that they never considered. Right? There's research to show, for example, that in the United States where there are elections, most of the polling places, most of the places where we vote are churches or schools. People are more likely to vote for Republican candidates in churches and more likely to vote for Democratic candidates in church or churches. There, we need to formation programs is in our elections.
But good, as a technique to create the right environment, assuming saying one must.
We need to never unite most of the unless we are likely to vote for Democratic candidates in schools. Never would they recognize that unless we made that kind of information. Look at the setting in which you're in. Consider the context in which that message, that ballot is going to be considered. Not just the thing itself. Right? So that, I think we have to think about instruction to people about the influence process differently. Not just instruction to the communicators, but instruction to the recipients about what aspects of that exchange they have to be cognizant of before they begin it. You know that there's research that if you go into a department store and there are a lot of credit card symbols around, people spend more money even if they pay in cash, because credit cards are associated with spending. It's not like cash where they're also associated with cost. Credit cards are associated with acquiring. Only later do you pay for it with cash. So look around, see if there are those kinds of symbols in the environment that would steer us in a direction. Those are the kinds of things that I think we have to build in to the instruction that we provide.
So, the gentleman over there, the microphone. And if we have time, we might just squeeze you in.
Thank you. Jeremy Kaplan. I'm also a fellow.
Jeremy, yeah.
My question is about predisposition, and particularly, does this have any impact on recruitment? Whether that's recruitment for a call centre or recruitment for a negotiating team. So what could be the learnings? Because if I look at your data, clearly there's an influence, but none of the scores move to 100%. So therefore there's a spectrum of people who are more or less likely to be influenced or primed or whatever the word is. So how could this influence how you recruit people for a team, a call center team, a negotiating team, etc.?
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right that clearly we didn't get to 100%. There are other factors that incline people in one direction or another, including what their predisposition are, essentially who they are as a person before that moment. Right? I don't doubt that for a second. And indeed, we have long used those kinds of screens in the recruitment process. We do tests to bring in the people who are similarly minded or whose approach is congruent with the goals of the organization and so on. And my guess is that to the extent that we give those people momentary focus on that dispositional trait or quality, that will elevate their likelihood to be motivated and successful in moving in that direction as well.
I think we can have one more last question there. So put your hand up.
Hi, I'm Sebastian Briggs-Williams. I'm also a fellow. We've talked for an hour about persuasion, and I just wondered, what about post-suasion? And if you've got it wrong first time, what are the chances of being able to save it?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about persuasion a little differently. That is, after you have moved people in a particular direction, how do you solidify that change? How do we get people to continue? We want that change to be durable, after all, after we've created. And I'm going to defer to a project that was done by my colleague Steve Martin here with the National Health Service. There's a big problem with what we call no-shows, and also called did not attends. People who make an appointment and then they just don't appear for the service. Right? It's very costly. And we know what happens at the end of each of those appointments. Typically, we get a card from the receptionist at the desk with the date and time of the next appointment on it. What Steve recognized is that if we commit people to that date and time in a more powerful way, they will be more likely to stay true to it. They will be more likely to continue into the future. So what he asked be done is that the patient be handed a blank card and a pen, and it asked to write in themselves the date and time of the next appointment. And no-shows dropped by 18% because of something that goes in. And it asked to write in themselves the date and time of the next appointment. And no-shows dropped by 18% because of something that happened first. An active public voluntary commitment gave that promise legs into the future. Yeah?
Wow. I feel privileged that someone actually did that to me and gave me that card in an NHS waiting room. So that actually is true at the physio department in St George's. So these are all fascinating techniques, and there are more to tell in the book, and I think that you will.
Hey, everybody. Come on in. Happy Sunday. Yes, Chris, I believe that was you who reminded me it was time for me to do Coffee with Scott Adams. And so here I am. I wasn't watching the clock. Well, good morning, Mark. Hello, Joe, Alan, Brad. Come on in. Grab your cup, your mug, your glass, your stein, your chalice, your tankard, your thermos, your flask. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure that I like to call the simultaneous sip. If you missed it, there might be more later. So something very funny happened in my life yesterday, my Twitter life, not my real life, my artificial life on Twitter. So in response to, I guess it was Anna Navarro, who, there's so many stories about this one tweet. Let me just focus on one thing. So I made a provocative claim in a tweet in which I said that 85% of CNN's political coverage, remember the words political coverage, was hoaxes and fake news. So I'm going to say that again because my exact words are going to matter to this story. I tweeted that 85% of CNN's political coverage was hoaxes and fake news. Now, how do you think that was greeted by the many thousands of people who read that tweet and don't think that CNN has fake news? Well, I can't tell you how many people tweeted back at me sarcastically. And let me ask my friend Dale to come tell you what people said about my estimate that 85% of the political coverage was fake news and hoaxes. They said something like this. Oh, you're just making up statistics. Show me your sources. Can you point me to a source that says that 85% of CNN's news is fake? Can you, Scott, point me to a source? Scene. Now, do you see what I did there? Did you notice that what Dale said, can you point me to a source that says 85% of CNN's news is fake? That's not what I said. What I said was 85% of their political coverage was fake. So a few fun things happened. For some reason, a large number of Democrats were cognitively blind to the words political coverage. And they would say to me, can you show me a source that says 85% of CNN's news is fake? To which I said, cheekily, because I thought it would be funny, I didn't say that. Why did I say I didn't say it? Because I didn't. Now, I did say 85% of the political coverage was fake news and hoaxes.
Technicality.
So then people started yelling at me online because it's so obvious that I did say that. And they would tweet my tweet that said 85% of their political coverage is hoaxes and fakes. They would show their own question that changed political coverage to CNN's news, and they would say, I'm going to save this tweet. I took a screenshot. You liar. You can see it right here how wrong you are. And I would recommend to them, because it was funnier than explaining what they were doing wrong, I would ask them in my tweets to find somebody who could read to explain the difference in those sentences to them. And they would just get angrier. My God, can't you see? You liar. You liar. These two sentences are exactly the same. This one that says these words and this one that has different words are exactly the same. They actually couldn't tell two simple sentences that were different. They couldn't tell. Now, I believe that these are people who are educated, sufficiently educated, that if you gave them a test on a quiz or something, they'd be able to tell that those sentences are different and they mean different things. But in the political context, they were cognitively blind to the sentence. Yeah, literally they were looking at it and they couldn't see some of the words. Their perception was just erasing those words. So that was the first thing that was fun. And I, of course, enjoyed letting them twist and yell at me because they were doing it in public and they were doing it in such a crazy way. So eventually some Trump supporters who could read came in and set them straight, which just happened a few minutes ago. So that's funny. But the other funny thing is the number of people who asked me for my source. I sent a tweet that says 85% of CNN's political coverage is hoaxes and fake news, and you have to see my Twitter feed just to see how many people came in and said, "Oh yeah, I'm not sure that number is real. I'm not sure you have a source for that." So the first funny part is the confirmation that people can't tell the difference between real news and fake news. Obviously, I made that number up. I don't know how more obvious it could be that I just made the number up. And the number of people who challenged me to support that number, it just makes your head spin. What is wrong with these people? How is that not obvious that I just made it up? But it gets better. So instead of just saying, okay, I just made it up, or instead of, playing it in, I don't know, any one of different ways I could play it, I decided to give them my source. So I replied to all the people who were asking for my source. I pasted in, I said, well, this could get you started, or words to that effect. This should get you started. And I pasted in a link to my own blog post about the Fine People hoax. Now, I know you're all smart enough to know that linking to my own blog post about just one hoax is really not an answer to show me your source for the 85% fake news. It's not really responsive, but it puts the critic in the awkward position of either reading this lengthy blog post I wrote, which is pretty long, and learning that their entire worldview has been wrong. Because if you just read that one thing, you're going to have some questions about CNN. So even though it wasn't an answer to the question, I found it hilarious. And what it did was it opened up this little portal where probably for the first time, people who were, CNN watchers were seeing reality for the first time. And people got really quiet when I sent it to them. Now, a lot of them wouldn't read it. They'd say, that's your own blog post. That's not a source. And then I would say, but the blog post points to the sources for the blog post. And it's those sources you can go check yourself. So I ended up red pilling all these critics who came in to mock me for not having a source, which of course I don't have, but it caused them to be exposed to some thoughts that should have probably dismantled their worldview if they read it. Now, many of you who have read that blog post, you know that I talk about what I call the hoax funnel, where they start with the big claim, and then when you debunk it, they just go to smaller and smaller claims until they get to the bottom of the funnel and they're just asking questions like, well, but how do you explain this then? And how can you explain this? And of course, those questions have easy answers. But on Twitter, somebody gave me an assist to put a really good ending on the funnel. Because when people get all the way down the funnel, I'm noticing that they're starting to do what Al Sharpton did, which is to say, there are no good people who could be in favor of keeping the Confederate statues, except that a Reuters poll showed that 44% of African Americans would like to keep the statues. I'm just going to let that sit there for a while. So after I've taken people down the hoax funnel, the very last fact, which I added as an update, is a screenshot showing that 44% of African Americans are okay with keeping the Confederate statues.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
And by the way, I don't know if that 44% number is accurate, but I'm sure it's more than 20%. Probably. I can't believe it would be so inaccurate that at least 20% don't have that opinion. And so it puts the critic in the position of saying that the African American community, 44% of them, are not fine people, which is racist, which I am enjoying pointing out. They double 44% to 88%. I don't know what that means. But the point is that I had a great fun revealing a little bit of truth to some people who apparently haven't seen what truth looks like. Now, I also, for some of those people, I responded that my statistic for the 85% of their coverage was based on, I said, just Google Russia collusion, add that to the 25th Amendment hoax, which CNN had been selling us for months, for a while. And then I showed my blog post about the Fine People hoax, which also toward the end, it includes a whole bunch of other hoaxes. So there's a lot of hoaxes. But then I wondered, has anybody created the CNN fact check? Because there's a fact check for the president, but is there a fact check for CNN? Has anybody done that? Because I would be quite curious if somebody could compile the list of CNN lies, because wouldn't it be handy that every time somebody says the president lied, that we could just send them a screenshot of a huge list of all the things that CNN said about the president, which we now know to be lies. It would be very interesting. We should just, and I'm not saying there will be 10,000 of them, but what you could do is maybe put, here's how the list would be funny. A list of CNN news that turned out not to be right, and next to it, a Google search that included plus CNN, so CNN had to be in the story, and then plus whatever the term was. So whatever the search term was that most represents that piece of news, such as Mueller report or whatever, and then how many hits it gets that were from CNN, because pretty much all of those were fake. So that would be interesting. It, of course, would not be scientific. It would not be directly comparable to anything the president says, but it would certainly close the conversation. All right. Yang's MO is bribing people with their own money to vote for him. That's a funny spin. I think what that refers to is Andrew Yang running for president, who's talking about giving people a universal basic income. Now the universal basic income means, somebody's paying for it. So he might be the first candidate who figured out that he can bribe the public with the public's own money. Now it's coming from different people, because the rich would be paying for the universal basic income of the poor. But why is he the first person to think of that? I suppose other people have said, let's raise your taxes and distribute the income. So I guess they've all said that. So I revised my statement. He's not the first person to do that.
Ohayou gozaimasu. Watashi no nama joke. This shot of Jim Carrey in the end made it look cool. I think I read somewhere, so it's a pretty legit source. I think I read a comment somewhere. That's we only look for the hashtag Sonic. I heard of I get to meet Juice WRLD. I can't believe both me and Susan listen to
White nationalists might like racist jokes. And, what do you want me to do? Maybe white nationalists like to suck dick. Well, tough for the gay community, because they have to stop sucking now, do they? My God, I genuinely expect at every second these people to say, you know what, we're going to take a break, we need to read some super chats. So I'm going to blackpill a lot of you now, but I don't think Sargon of Akkad is going to become an EU MP. It's something that would be very funny and it would piss off a lot of people, but I just don't think it's feasible. And I will explain to you why. He made another joke video where he said that he wouldn't even rape Jess Phillips, another MP in the UK. But because of all the media pressure, because everyone is asking him to apologize for saying that he wouldn't even rape her, with all this pressure, he might cave. But let's be honest, there isn't enough beer in the world that will get him to do it. So obviously, it's a very offensive joke. And it is used as a joke, and everyone knows it's a joke. But YouTube just struck down that video. Jeremy Corbyn, leader of Labour, denounced Sargon of Akkad, like the pleb on the internet got denounced by a high-ranking politician. And now Jess Phillips is like, how dare he. So, I understand what he wants to do, right? The way I would explain it is that he doesn't like the fact that offense is used as a political weapon. And this is normal in British society and in the way they do politics, and I think it's starting to become normal in a lot of countries in the world. Because, for example, Jess Phillips did the exact same thing. Like, she used to say that she's going to knife Jeremy Corbyn in the front, which is obviously a metaphor. It is used as a figure of speech, but because she was against Jeremy Corbyn and the mainstream media is siding with Jeremy Corbyn, she was trashed in the press, just like Sargon of Akkad is. And I could just give you dozens of such examples where in the United Kingdom someone would say something that's a joke or a metaphor or something off the cuff, and the press is treating like they're absolutely serious, that they're some deranged individuals, and they're making this article. It's like, look, you probably don't know who this person is, but they said this and that, and this is why you need to hate them. And I guess that Sargon wants to fight against this ideology. That he wants to, I suppose, the society where he would want to live in is a society where people just talk about the issues rather than the character of the person. Like, if a doctor tells you to stop smoking because smoking is bad, you shouldn't care that the doctor smokes 5 cigarettes per day. That's not your lung, it's the doctor's. But your lung, you need to take care of it. You know what I mean? It's like, just because the person is a hypocrite doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. So, you know, he would like to have a society where people address political issues, like let's talk about immigration, let's talk about wealth disparity, let's talk about free speech, you know, let's talk about this and that. But instead, all the media focuses on, rather than focusing on the important issue that plagues British society, they're focusing on, oh, this person made the joke, oh, look what this person said, oh, look, 10 years ago, our necromancers have uncovered, they actually said, like, the people unearthed this video. And he won't win this. And the reason he won't win it is that maybe if he would have had, like, some $5 million backing, like other politicians do, maybe, you know, but he's just one guy that, sure, he is successful on YouTube, and his message would resonate with a lot of people, but his message will never reach the normies. Like, the mainstream media is making absolutely sure that they're the gatekeepers. And if the very first thing you hear about the person is that he wants to rape an MP or something, you're already going to have a bad image about him and probably not going to bother to check out what that person has to say.
Well, no. The thing is, we're trying to red pill people on the lying media.
And, you know, it's very black pilling in a way, and he knew that this would happen. You know, he just hopes that a lot more people will be aware to what the mainstream media is doing. And, you know, hopefully the lawsuits is going to raise more awareness. But, yeah, like, think about it this way. This is not about Sargon of Akkad. It's basically like anyone who comes into the political scene is going to be treated like this. You know, there's very little room for change anymore, because no person is pure enough to pass the purity test. Like, anyone would have said something 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. Everyone would have done something that's not nice. Like, Jeremy Corbyn, for example, a leader in Britain, which is the leader of a left-leaning party. He supported pretty much every single terrorist organization there is. Like, I don't know if there's one that he missed. But the media doesn't focus on him because the media, like a lot of people in British media, are Labour activists. They have Labour Party membership and they're a journalist. Like, of course they're going to like that. You know, of course they're going to turn a close eye. And this is how the smear function. If you're against the mainstream media, then you are going to get criticized heavily. There's going to be hit piece after hit piece after hit piece after you. While if you're with the mainstream media, they're going to turn a blind eye. And despite the fact that a lot of people are not watching the mainstream media anymore, they still have a strong influence in society and they still have push with corporations. So, in the case of Sargon of Akkad, like when you have Jeremy Corbyn and British politicians denouncing him, and then you have the mainstream media making a video, making articles against you, yeah, YouTube is going to take action. And they're going to give you a community guideline strike for making that video. And they're going to take the video down. So now, no one gets to see the video. No one gets to understand that it's a joke. He can't even defend himself. And the mainstream media can just say that, yeah, he wants to rape Jess Phillips, which he doesn't. Like, any normal person can figure that out, that this is a complete lie. Like, I don't think Jess Phillips is worried. I don't think she hired the extra security team because Carlos Swindon is going to come and, you know, this is all political. This is all about power. It's weaponizing offense in order to gain power in society. So now you have a Labour MP which is saying that the Electoral Commission of Britain should surely have standards about who can and can't stand for election. If Facebook and Twitter can ban these people for hate speech, how is that they are not allowed to stand for election? This is mind-blowing, all right? Like, this is what I like to call authoritarian democracy. So let's take Sargon of Akkad out of the picture. Let's say it's a random guy. You know, whomever you want. Just pick a random dude. And that random dude, if he is not vetted by the establishment, and even if he would be supported by millions of people,
Burger King gets woke in a new commercial, but will they go broke? I don't think so. Although I'm very confused by the advertisement, it appears that Burger King is trying to use depression to market a product, and I don't know what that product is. This is one of the biggest pitfalls of woke advertising. In this story from a few days ago, Burger King takes aim at McDonald's by introducing unhappy meals. Burger King is coming for McDonald's Happy Meals in an unexpected way. According to a press release, they're introducing real meals. Yes, there are 5 different real meals. They've got pissed, blue, so they got mad, sad, bitter, excited, and don't give an F. The Feel Your Way boxes come with a full-sized Whopper combo. Oh, so that's what's in it. It's a meal, fries and a shake, and no toy. So what are they selling? They're just selling combo meals in a fancy box? Okay, here's the thing. Here's the video.
Yes.
Burger King Feel Your Way. We can see that it's got more dislikes than likes because I gotta tell you, man, I have always been someone who's like, listen, if you want to sell me a product, just tell me what that product is, right? Imagine if Burger King made a commercial that instead of, I'm not going to play this because they'll copy strike me or something, but this is a minute 48 of basically, let's see these stories. This guy just talks about how he wakes up sad. This chick is being, bullied, I guess, so she's upset. This chick says my boss is a creep, so she's quitting. Then you got, what is this guy? What is this? Oh, that's still her. Then you got same dude again, and then she's taking, so the same people. Then you got some dude who's living at home with his parents because he's got student loan debt. This dude just got ghosted by his Tinder date. For real, he's like, I've been ghosted, I should have known, I'll be alone forever. It's like, dude, chill out. It's one bad Tinder match. And then you've got this chick, and she's talking about how they're saying she can't raise her kid or something by herself. And then they're all singing, and then I guess at some point they all get You know, they're all just like, you know what? I don't care. No one is happy all the time, and that's okay. So I'm going to get these meals. Here's the thing about these commercials, right? First, when I go to a Burger King, and I don't, because Burger King is not that good. Burger King makes me sick, man. I'm just not a fan. But I may go try the Impossible Burger once they have it. But here's the thing. You want to sell me a product, please. Just tell me what the product is. Because they do this big, long commercial of people singing about how depressed they are. And then it ends by being like, Blue Meal, Pissed Meal, DGAF Meal, Real Meals. And they don't tell you what these are. Why would I go to Burger King for a real meal? I have no idea what's in it. Now, I get it. Branding is important. And they want me to know about the meal. And then maybe they're hoping it's like a clickbait kind of thing where it's like, well, I want to go see what it is, so I better run on down to Burger King and ask them what their meals are all about. Here's how I like commercials. First of all, the meals themselves are the marketing. It's like, get a blue meal, get a gray meal. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to buy your weird meal, dude. If I want a burger, I want a burger. Now, it may work. This is the question. Will they get broke? I'm going to say the answer is no. I don't think this commercial will be particularly effective. It's going to generate some awareness, right? So regardless, it's going to work out for them. This video that I'm doing, I'm going to say this. Simply because I'm doing this video, they're getting press. So I would ask people not to buy. No. Do whatever you want. The point is, one of the goals of doing these woke commercials is it's an effort to get people like me, people like you, to talk about their brand. So bravo, Burger King, you did it. But here's the thing. They did it in a not so bad way. First of all, it's just a bunch of... The reason I say it's getting woke is because that's how it's being pitched. I see people are sharing this saying, oh, this is getting woke done right. Wow, really meaningful. No, dude. I don't care for your insincere corporate take on depression and weird millennial issues. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe you. I don't think you care. And it's also kind of... It's really weird that you're trying to use depression, anxiety, and stress to sell me a cheeseburger. More importantly, they don't even actually try to sell me a cheeseburger.
Oh my God, late-stage capitalism loves this.
The last 10 seconds of the ad, you make me watch this song from people complaining about their lives. Dude, I don't want to be around that. You know what, man? Let me give you some advice. If you find that you're surrounded by people that are negative all the time, get away from those people. I'm not saying don't be friends with them. I'm saying you need to be exposed to positivity, right? This is bad. You shouldn't encourage, entice, or like surround people, but they say feel your way. So here's the thing. Gillette was targeting a group of people with stereotypically negative behaviors. They're doing something similar here. It's not as woke. It's only a little bit woke, right? So I don't think they're really going to offend people on culture war grounds. But on corporate grounds, I would say this is really, really offensive. It's gonna make people be like, nah, I'm not interested. And that's probably why it's got, as of right now, more than 50% thumbs down. And it's got a decent amount of views, but not that many, right? Gillette got a ton of views.
Whoa.
So here we are talking about Burger King doing these silly, stupid corporate ads. And I got to pull this up from Reddit because I found this funny. This is from A Boring Dystopia on Reddit, which is I think it's a really funny subreddit. I actually don't look at it a lot, but they say, the top comment, this is funny. Talking about Burger King doing these silly, stupid corporate ads. And I got to pull this up from Reddit because I found this funny. This is from A Boring Dystopia on Reddit, which is I think it's a really funny subreddit. I actually don't look at it a lot, but they say, the top comment, this is atrocious. As a PSA, this would be good. Help make people aware of the prevalence and legitimacy of mental health issues and existential anxieties among millennials and younger generations. Even as an ad for a therapy service or something. I could have stomached it. But Burger King, you're in crippling debt. Your social life is crumbling. Your workplace is toxic and abusive. Your community is ostracizing you. Eat a processed food meal and your suffering will be validated. Burger King can burn. Seriously, this is one of the biggest problems with woke advertising. What the F did I just watch? This is a really great comment. That's the point. Like, dude, I know you're trying to sell me a cheeseburger. This is kind of the worst way to do it. But here's the thing. We have seen woke advertising gaining more and more prominence, right? So you remember the Gillette ad. This is a story from January 15th, 2019. I'm not going to read through it. If you're not familiar, for whatever reason, Gillette made an ad about toxic masculinity, which basically took stereotypical negative male traits and made a big commercial saying, hey, don't do this. But that's not, you can't take the worst aspects, which are rare, and then insult men. Gillette used to say the best a man can be or can get or whatever, and it was like firefighters and heroes. Then they make this where it's like dudes doing all of these bad things, and it's like, you shouldn't do that, finger wag. I don't want to be talked down to, right? You want to talk about toxic masculinity, they could have made a positive commercial, and it could have shown a bunch of heroic guys doing good things. For the most part, it's just them doing bad things. But there's a reason I bring this up, and it's because we've been watching the rise of woke advertising for a while, right? So this is an op-ed from The Guardian, which I'm not necessarily going to read, but I'm just showing you that it's been around for a while. Faking wokeness. How advertising targets millennial liberals for profit. They don't care about you. Do you think Burger King cares if you've got anxiety, stress? You think Burger King cares that you're laden with student loan debt, you can't find a job, and you live with your parents? No! They want you to go spend your money on their cheeseburgers. So this bothers me for a few reasons. For one, we've got serious problems right now in this country, okay? Things that are, the student loan crisis is a massive bubble that's going to burst, and it's going to decimate the economy. We've got a huge problem in the housing market because millennials aren't having families and they're not buying homes. One of the reasons young people aren't getting married and having kids is because they can't afford to. So we've got, don't get me wrong, like cell phones, internet, things are pretty good. But when young people are essentially, signing up for this system, college, because they're told to, well, then it stunts their development and it makes it hard for the rest of the market to carry on. These are serious issues. And Burger King is trivializing it because you know what, man? I can respect to an extent companies trying to do things with their marketing budgets for a good reason. Here's my pitch to all of these companies. You want to make woke content. You want to make morally just content. Here's what you do. However much money you spend on this, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars, because we're talking about production, we're talking about marketing, like actually spending the ads on TV and stuff. If they did, I don't know. Here's what you do. Take all that money and do what Casey Neistat did. Just go spend it on like actually helping clean up a beach or something and make a video where you go, instead of doing a woke ad where we pander to you, we're going to do a video where we clean up this beach and we're going to use our budget to pay for that. And that's the ad. There you go. Like that, in my opinion, I'd be like, I can respect that because you're actually doing something. What are they actually doing with these commercials? Nothing. They're pretending to care about you so they can sell you a box. Salty meal. What is salty meal? What is it really called? It really is called the salty meal. Why am I going to go to Burger King? Like, okay, this is it. They don't tell me what's in it. They don't tell me what they're marketing. They're just pandering to my anxiety, stress, and depression. That's cold, dude. That's cold. That to me is like if a dude in a suit showed up to your house with a shit-eating grin, sunglasses, and says, "Oh, you poor baby, I feel for you. How about a cheeseburger?" I'd be like, "What, dude? Cheeseburger's not going to solve my problems." Sure, you could argue it's bringing awareness to the problems faced by young people. And at least some people liked it. I found this because someone I know was like, "Wow, this is a really heartwarming advertisement. They should do more ads like this." And I'm like, no, man. Burger King's ad should have been something much simpler, much shorter, and it should have been like, it should have just been this. Not everyone is happy all the time, so we're making a different kind of meal for a different mood. And each of these meals contained these things. In the DGAF, like apparently all the meals are the same, I guess. Like according to the CBS ad, it's like they're all just Whopper meals with like, there's no toy or anything. So what do I get? What's the salty meal? Do you like, is it salt? You actually putting salt? What's the blue meal? What's Yas? Wait, hold on. Do they actually market the Yas meal? Come on, tell me they do. Yes, they do. Oh my God, please. Here we go. Yes. What is that? What is this? I'm gonna say one last thing.
Oh God.
Here's how I would do a commercial. Just because I'm a boring dude who wears the same clothes every day. Here's what I'd do. Hey, I sell cheeseburgers. They're pretty good. If you want a cheeseburger, we sell them. There you go. We got some new meals. There's food in them. Cheeseburgers, French fries, and a drink. That's what we sell. 10 seconds. Instead, they do an hour and 48 minutes talking about, showing all these people who are stressed out and like complaining about their lives and go, "Aw, are you sad? Maybe you need a salty meal." Aw, dude. It's not so much about wokeness. It's about pretending to care. Like, dude, Burger King, they don't care, man. They're sitting in a room and there's a pitch meeting. We should do a social justice, social awareness commercial. What should we include in it? Let's show a bunch of depressed millennials and then make a product that's catering to your depression. Because here's an important point too. I'll say one thing. Listen, the Yaz meal. Come on, show me that. Yes, that's not sad. That's a happy thing, right? And DGAF, what is this? DGAF, that's like nothing. So you've got two that are like neutral or positive. Why is the whole commercial just like, my life sucks? Dude,